Our Central Africa time on this Wednesday. It's raining outside. A very good morning, Jumbo Africa. I'm Elvis Preslin. We'll be with you until 12 o'clock today. Now, today we focus on the non-profit organization Right to Care, who says that equity in healthcare will only be achieved when the rights of all population groups, that includes lesbians, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, the LGBTI people, and even sex workers, are all respected, Kendall.
Absolutely. And we want to find out from you, how do we deal with the stigma and discrimination against the LGBTI community affected by HIV/AIDS?
That's the question. Let's take a look at what you are telling us. This one coming in from Kenneth Malachi says, the principle of Ubuntu is needed. Tolerance, brotherhood, and understanding. We need to learn to accept one another and respect our differences. Every person should feel free to behave the way they want. So says Kenneth.
Got another one coming in from Ikona Nazo, says, we need to respect and accept one another. Above all, we must learn to be open-minded and tolerant. If living is God's will, so is creation. Then he and him alone can judge. Let's stop discrimination and its seed, which is abuse.
Very good comments thus far. Keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But on the poll today, the suspended head of the Gauteng Health Department, Dr. Barney Silabano, he will continue to face more questions today in his role in the botched relocations of 143 mentally ill patients who died.
Yeah, the arbitration hearing carries on, and we keep hearing some testimony which is scary to say the least. And we want to find out from you, does Dr. Barney Silabano's testimony at the Life Esidimeni arbitration hearings make sense to you?
Well, so far, 72 votes on. 85% of you are saying no, it does not make sense. Only 15% are saying yes. Let's see
what's being said by you on social media. Alpha Male says the doctor's ducking and diving, busy trying hard to protect the MEC. You must just tell the truth and go to jail and be an honest man.
Kenneth says that's what they do. They come and say a lot of senseless things and expect to dance to the tune. I think it's about time that these guys are charged with first-degree murder on multiple accounts. Well, strong words there from Kenneth. So keep them coming. We'll read all those comments. But hey, something is happening. It's raining today, and it's also raining goals in the PSL.
Raining goals, as you can see, it's phenomenal. Some 10 goals scored in 3 matches last night. Well, all of them in 2 matches, one without any goals, but we'll get to that later. We want to find out your thoughts. What happened?
Where does it come from? Yesterday we were discussing, we said we got too many good goalkeepers in this country, and now
all of a sudden they're letting in the goals. So give us your thoughts on exactly why you think it's happening like that now.
Lenga says, oh, well, it's good for our football.
I agree with you, Lenga. It is. Finally, Nazim Khotbum says, I wish they can continue like that because our players keep on missing easy chances, says Nazim.
Well, there you have it. We'll read all those as we continue. But right now, let's get down to business and take a look at your news headlines. The suspended head of the Gauteng Health Department, Dr. Barney Silabano, to have more grilling today at the Life Esidimeni arbitration hearings this morning. From one hearing to another, the acting Eskom chair, September Koza, will face more questions at Parliament's inquiry into corporate governance and state capture at Eskom. And yes, it's bad news for you if you're driving a vehicle this morning. For this festive season, motorists will have to fork out 71 and 60 cents per litre more for petrol as well as diesel, respectively. Well, it's time to take a walk. Yeah, take a walk, jump on your bicycle, leave the car at home. Might give you maybe can lose some kilograms this festive season with an increase in petrol. But before we get anywhere else, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports.
Before we talk about cutting the calories, I think a lot of people need to consider this. Like before the first Tuesday of the month, fill up your tank. Fill up your tank to avoid all these massive price increases that we're getting in diesel and petrol. That's what I try and do. And I don't know if it really works, but I feel better about it at the end of the month. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today.
Oh, what a
Percy Tau's brace helps Mamelodi Sundowns break the PSL's goal drought as they crush Baroka FC 4-0 to go top of the log.
Oh, the good ball! Oh, the blinder of a goal to complement the beauty of a run. Percy Tau with his second, Sundowns with their fourth.
Pogba, it's a nice ball forward. It's an excellent finish from Romelu Lukaku. 1-1.
2 second-half goals by Romelu Lukaku and Marcus Rashford secure an UEFA Champions League last 16 berth for Manchester United for the first time since 2013.
Here's Mata. Rashford, will it be 2 in a minute? Oh, yes, it will.
It's happened quick.
He's chopped it on. It's done and dusted.
A jubilant Australia take a 2-0 series lead in the Ashes with a resounding 120-run victory over England in Adelaide. All this we've got for you for later on, should we get to the sport. But for now, do stay with Elvis as he's got riveting news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour. The suspended head of the Gauteng Health Department, Dr. Barney Silabano, will be back at the Life Esidimeni arbitration hearings in Johannesburg today to face more questions about his role in the botched relocations that left 143 mentally ill patients dead. Yesterday, he told the hearing that the decision to terminate the long-standing contract with Life Esidimeni was taken due to pressure from the Treasury. He, however, admitted that there was no system to keep track of what was happening at the NGOs. Dr. Silabani was also asked why he did not know that more than 76 patients died towards the end of the year, as he kept on referring to the 36 he had learned of in July.
The suspended Gauteng Health HOD, Dr. Barney Silabane, finally has his turn, but not without a fight.
I do not see that my client can be of any assistance to this dispute resolution process in regard to the question of compensation. Is he does want to say something to the families in the form of an apology.
He cannot be treated any different from all other witnesses that has been before these proceedings.
Silabane has been fingered in the Health Ombudsman's report as one of the key players in the transfers that led to the death of 143 patients. But on the stand, he downplayed his role in the project.
I knew only of the deinstitutionalization, the bigger project of the deinstitutionalization with the faces. The marathon part, I want, and that's my opinion, it must have been worked by the team that was implementing that.
Much to the frustration of the arbitrator.
You are head of the department. You are accounting officer. So yours is not an opinion of some innocent bystander. You are the general here. So you can't get us down a path of my opinion.
No.
Silabane claimed he only knew of the severity of the deaths after receiving a call from Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi and moved to close some of the NGOs.
Why did you close them down?
The minister didn't say, go and check if you like the NGO or not. He said we can't afford to have other patients passing away. So go and close those NGOs.
He, however, had a tough time explaining why he failed to act.
Why, in the scheme of your finances, did you choose to sacrifice the most vulnerable? Go and think about it and let's talk about it tomorrow.
Silabane has considered that the NGOs were not suitable to care for mentally ill patients. He says he will take accountability for the project, but will not take responsibility for the deaths. He's expected to field more tough questions from lawyers representing the families. Manqoba Mchunu, SABC News in Parktown, Johannesburg.
Talking about the Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi has announced an outbreak of Listeriosis, which is a foodborne disease in the country. 557 cases have been reported between January and November this year, most of them in Gauteng, the Western Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. 36 people have died from Listeriosis this year, and the first outbreak of Listeriosis in the country was documented in August 1977. Hospitals have been treating between 60 to 70 patients every year. The minister was interviewed on SABC News this morning.
It occurs wildly in nature. It's found in soil, it's found in water, it's found in vegetation. Now, if it can find its way to the food you are going to eat, then you get listeriosis. You are now infected with Listeria monocytogenes, and you are going to get sick. And of course, you might recover or you might perish as it is. But it is treatable. It is fully treatable. And I realized yesterday that some people were confused how 36 people die with a disease that is treatable. There are lots of diseases that are treatable, but still kill a lot of people because they are very virulent. A very simple example is TB. It has been treatable for the past 200 years, but it still kills 1.8 million people around the globe every year, and in South Africa alone, 40,000 people. So I just wanted to explain that a disease can be treatable but still kill if it is virulent enough, and that's what Listeria monocytogenes is. Anybody can get Listeria, Leanne, anybody. But there are groups of people who are particularly and especially vulnerable. These are neonates, newborns in the first 28 days of life. These are pregnant women, because when women are pregnant, their immunity is not strong. These are people whose immunity has been compromised by conditions and diseases, like people who are living with AIDS, people who have got diabetes mellitus, people who have got cancer, people who have got chronic kidney or chronic liver disease. They are specifically vulnerable.
When we look at the numbers, 345 cases in Gauteng, we've got 71 in the Western Cape and 37 in KwaZulu-Natal. That's just a bit of a breakdown of the cases that we've seen right now. Is it contagious?
No.
Not contagious. So it's something
in fact, being contagious is one of the eligible criteria for notifiability. Listeria is not contagious. What we mean by that is that it's not communicable. It doesn't move from one person to the other.
Excellent. Okay.
If you get it, the only way I can get it is for you to contaminate the food, and I come and ingest that food.
Okay, so it is through food mostly that you get
It's a foodborne disease.
It's a foodborne disease. Yes. It is treatable. The things that you must look out for basically is if you are feeling very unwell, diarrhea, nausea.
Well, let me simplify them by classifying them.
Please, and then we'll have to wrap.
Yes, if you get Listeria, 3 things can happen to you.
Okay.
1, you can get the flu-like symptoms. That's what you're describing. Headache, fever, you may get diarrhea, general body pains, weakness, joint pains, vomiting, etc. That's the first group of symptoms. And you might easily recover from that. But you might also get septicemia. Septicemia means your whole bloodstream is now infected. Wow. That's very dangerous. You may even end up in the ICU because you are very sick now. You may also get meningoencephalitis, meaning now your brain and the membranes around the brain are infected. There you don't have to ask. You'll feel very sick. You may even have convulsions. You may even go into coma. You may die.
Meanwhile, members of Parliament's Public Enterprises Portfolio Committee will this morning continue to cross-examine the acting Eskom chair, Zatemba Khoza. Khoza was asked about his role in the suspension of top Eskom executives during Zola Tsotsi's chairmanship of the board. Yesterday, the committee dismissed the suspended Eskom CFO, Anoj Singh, with a warning that he should appear when subpoenaed again in 2018. On Monday night, Singh sent a 400-page document to the committee, which meant that members didn't have enough time to read through it. The parliamentary inquiry is looking into corporate governance at the power utility. Now, we'll speak to our reporter in a short while to give us an update as to what we can expect today. You don't want to miss it, and we'll probably cross there live a little bit later. Meanwhile, over 700 people are expected to hear President Jacob Zuma's opening address on Tuesday for the Energy Indaba at Gallagher State Convention Centre here in Midrand in Johannesburg. The two-day event is hosted by the Department of Energy and will be held under the theme Energy Sector, Stimulating Economic Growth, Development and Job Creation. Earlier, SABC News spoke with the Minister of Energy, David Mashlobo.
We are at a stage where the economic growth has slowed down. There are a number of challenges. When I had an interaction with a number of stakeholders in the energy sector, we agreed that the time has arrived to understand that the energy is the biggest contributor to economic growth. We are contributing more than 34% of the GDP. And for this economy to grow, all these people in the energy sector have agreed to come together and understand and respond to a question to say, what are we going to do differently this time around in a short term, medium term, and long term to reignite our economic prospect, while at the very same time giving the needed jobs that are supposed to be there. We are going to be having a lot of leaders in the economic sector, the experts, the academics, the users there that are actually in the energy sector. We are also going to be having the banking industry, and we're all going to convene under one roof and answer one question only: growth, growth, growth.
Well, the price of fuel went up sharply at midnight, with petrol rising by 71 cents a litre and diesel by 60 cents a litre. So hopefully you did fill up. Motorists queued at filling stations ahead of the highest increase since 2014. Unleaded 95 petrol will cost 14 Rand 76 cents a litre inland and 14 Rand 27 cents a litre at the coast. Diesel will cost 12 Rand 95 cents a litre. The main reason for the increases are the weakening of the rand against the dollar in the period under review and, of course, higher crude oil prices. The South African Social Security Agency, SASSA, says it's concerned by the increasing number of scams and false information that are targeting beneficiaries of social grants. The latest false information being circulated is that SASSA offices will be closed during December and that beneficiaries will not receive their January payments. In a statement, SASSA has assured its beneficiaries that all its offices will remain open for business during December and will only close as usual on public holidays like Christmas, Boxing Day, as well as New Year. The agency has urged beneficiaries to report such acts of criminality to the police. Now, if you have those, do get in touch with SASSA and let them know that there is a scam in the running. Now, back to our main story this morning. For the latest on the Eskom inquiry, we are now joined by SABC's reporter there, Manalisi Dubasa. Very good morning, Manalisi. Can you tell us and quickly recap for us on some of the testimony that came out yesterday from the acting Eskom CEO?
Yes, Elvis. Yesterday we had the board of Eskom and the Assistant General Manager, Mr. Minar, who was briefing legislators about the controversial 30 million rand bonus or retirement payout of Mr. Brian Molefe, the former CEO. He was justifying that payment, saying that Mr. Molefe was on a 5-year fixed contract at Eskom, which miraculously, I don't know how to explain this, but which he says that it was a permanent appointment, something which, members of parliament took time to try to understand what exactly does a 5-year fixed term contract means, if it also means that it is permanent, in a sense that Mr. Molefe, while he was on contract, he was entitled to all sorts of benefits, including pension, medical aid, and so on and so forth. And the other witness who was sent packing here is the former CFO, Mr. Anuj Singh, who came here with a 400-page document at the very 11th hour, and the MPs decided that they can't go through that submission of 400 pages, and they decided that they will send him back home, and he will come back at a later date at his own costs. He will buy himself his own tickets to come here. And the board members came here, they denied everything that has been said about them in terms of their participation in state capture. And today, we will be having the Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises, Mr. Ben Martins. You'll recall that when the company secretary at Eskom, Ms. Daniels, was here, he implicated Mr. Martins in the state capture at Eskom, where she said that she was called by Mr. Issa for a meeting at Melroad Arc. and where he was introduced to Mr. Ben Martin, Mr. Duduzane Zuma, Mr. Ajay Gupta, and a Chinese woman she couldn't remember then. And Mr. Martin quickly refuted those allegations. But today, he will have an opportunity to tell the members of parliament, because when he refuted those allegations then, he couldn't remember where he was during that day, which Ms. Daniel said he was in that meeting. He couldn't even recall, where the event itself. So I'm sure he had chance now to go back to his diary and to consult with his PA, and he will probably tell us exactly where he was that day, and if, the submission by Ms. Daniels are false or not.
So the Eskom CFO, or the former CFO, Anoj Singh, couldn't sing yesterday, but what can we expect from the Eskom inquiry today? We do understand that the Public Enterprises Minister is supposed to be there today as well.
Today, in fact, the main interesting person to appear is Mr. Dan Martin, Mr. Ben Martin, as I said. It does look, judging from Ms. Daniel's, submission here 2 weeks ago, that Mr. Martin actually was in the middle of this state capture at Eskom, because the main issue that they were talking about in that meeting, according to Ms. Daniels, was this court case of Mr. Brian Molefe, where Mr. Ajay Gupta was so keen that it should be postponed at least until after the December conference. And Ms. Daniels then says Mr. Ajay Gupta uttered something about the chances of Ms. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, which she couldn't recall because of the deep accent of Indian accent of Mr. Ajay Gupta. But he was so adamant that this thing should be postponed up until after the December conference of the ANC, which starts next week. Now, the question is, what was Mr. Martin's role there? I think that's what the members of parliament will be keen to know. Why was he there? What was his role, and what input did he make in that meeting? Because if by any chance Mr. Martin was involved in trying to intervene in this whole saga of Mr. Brian Molefe and Eskom, right there might be possibly, some conflict of interest and possibly, some criminal issues involved there. But we are going to hear in the next 10 minutes when he appear right here before this committee today.
Manalisi, thank you so much. That was our SABC reporter, Manalisi Dubase, in Parliament, giving us an update on what you can expect today. We'll also go there live a little later. The race is on, and presidential hopeful Matthew Sposa says that he will be challenging the outcome of the African National Congress's Mpumalanga General Council, demanding a rerun. The application also calls for the province's executive committee to be dissolved. Now, this is in light of the PGC's nomination for Unity on Friday.
Today you are coming for Unity, all of you.
Unity received more than 200 nominations after delegates wrote it down on ballot papers in place of abstentions or candidates' names and surnames. Mpumalanga nominated ANC's Member of Parliament, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, to be the next leader of the party. Last week, ANC Secretary General Gwede Mantashe poured cold water on this unknown entity called Unity.
There will be no vote for Unity because there will be no unity on the ballot box. Okay? So there can be no vote for Unity because there is no body called Unity, and therefore there will be no unity on the ballot box.
But the ANC's presidential hopeful, Matthew Sposa, is taking none of this so-called unity.
There is this animal called unity. For unity is Didi Mabuza. It's some scheme by a village boy trying to cheat the system. If you check further information which is in our possession, which we are filing at court, he says unity is me. He doesn't hide it. So which means he's got double votes on one ballot. It's the worst fraud in the electoral process of the ANC. There are people who are delegates who have been removed and replaced by people who are not delegates, who were never at BGMs. And we also have got information which we put before court indicating that Now, that's interfering with the democratic process in a great movement called the African National Congress.
POSA says they want to make sure that branches that are innocent go to the conference.
There are 6 legs on which the court application stands. And on any of the legs, we can throw the whole PGC out. But we want to be very responsible as members of the ANC. And in a particular way, make sure that the branches which are innocent go to the conference, and that the branches which are tainted don't go to the conference. Because it is not fair for all other provinces, who are some of them bringing legitimate delegates, that we in Mpumalanga must bring ghost delegates. But if there are provinces which are bringing ghost delegates, me, Matthew Posa, and I know about it, I would like to expose it. And I think it's our responsibilities as members of the ANC not to tolerate corruption, because it corrodes the soul of our movement.
The presidential hopeful is expected to file the court application this week. Lehana Tsoteti, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Meanwhile, the Provincial Executive Committee of the African National Congress in Mpumalanga has described allegations made by the ANC presidential hopeful Matthews Posa as outrageous and fabricated. In a statement, the PEC says that Posa accuses the provincial chairperson, Didi Mabuza, of having personal militia that intimidates ANC members with the intention of achieving certain political outcomes. Now, the PEC further expressed satisfaction in the outcomes of the PGC. Continuing to lead by example, the Economic Freedom Fighters spokesperson, Esidimeni Ndlozi, has graduated with an PhD at the University of the Witwatersrand. At Wits, the 32-year-old says that he wouldn't have achieved this without the support of his mother and the collective leadership of the EFF. Dr. Ndlozi obtained a doctorate in the field of political studies.
Association brings assimilation. Practice makes perfect.
Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, born and grew up in the dusty streets of the Vaal Triangle. This mud structure he called home. An area rich in history, known for 3 massacres during apartheid. But Ndlozi distinguished himself as a communicator at a young age. In this 2002 interview, the grade 11 people from Kutlotaro Secondary School had just won the Young Communicators Award. And even then, his vision was clear.
I want to study psychology, counseling psychology. I want to deal with people, especially the mind, because I'm aware that the problem in this world is in the mind. Poverty is the state of mind. Everything is just the mind. So I want to deal with the mind of these people. I want to bring about the change. I believe I was born for a change.
Mbuyiseni embarked on a career in politics, becoming more active during his time at Wits University when he joined the ANC SASCO.
I've not channel for this. This is our university.
But his career in politics was propelled when he joined the EFF. All this while he was pursuing his PhD.
We have to take knowledge production seriously, and all of us as young people, particularly African people, we must get as many degrees, because they are pieces of knowledge production, so that we can start our independent university from scratch that we can be proud of.
And what does the future hold for Ndlozi?
First of all, it's a book. Is to try and turn the thesis into a book so that it's accessible to everybody.
The members of the EFF were there to give him support. Nhlanhla Khatlani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
My grandmother used to say education is very important. Well, there you have it, leading by example, Dr. Ndlozi from the EFF. Further afield now, the United States President Donald Trump is expected to officially recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, alarming leaders in the Middle East and raising concern at the United Nations. Now, the move by Washington could upend decades of American policy and throw hopes of salvaging the two-state solution in disarray. Palestinian officials have confirmed that President Donald Trump informed the Palestinian leadership about his decision, a move they say could end the peace process.
Jerusalem remains a final status issue,
a city of historic significance to Jews, Muslims and Christians, with both Israel and the future state of Palestine claiming at least part of the city as their capital.
Like you, we've seen the press reports. I'm not aware of any direct communication between the U.S. and the Secretariat on this particular issue here in New York. We obviously await to see an official announcement, but as a matter of principle, the Secretary General has said that he has consistently warned against any unilateral action that would have the potential to undermine the two-state solution. And we've always regarded Jerusalem as a final status issue that must be resolved through direct negotiations between the two parties based on relevant Security Council resolution.
Moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem was a campaign promise of Trump, but it could permanently undermine any hopes of a negotiated settlement between the two sides.
President Abbas received a telephone call from President Trump. Our understanding and our position, the position of President Abbas, is very clear. If the American embassy is going to be moved to Jerusalem, this is against the international law, and this will be unacceptable from our side. If this happens, it would complicate things. It would put an obstacle to the peace process. Maybe it will be the end of the peace process. Hopefully, the American administration will backtrack from this decision if they are willing to move ahead.
The likely move has drawn concern from many Arab countries and the European Union that are largely part of an international consensus on Jerusalem.
The European Union supports the resumption of a meaningful peace process towards a two-state solution. We believe that any action that would undermine these efforts must absolutely be avoided. A way must be found through negotiations to resolve the status of Jerusalem as the future capital of both states, so that the aspiration of both parties can be fulfilled.
There is this sense of déjà vu with the anticipated announcement from President Trump Wednesday. He would be bucking international consensus by moving the embassy, just like he did by announcing the withdrawal of the United States from the Paris Climate Change Agreement in June. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
As you know, the race is on. The increase of politically motivated violence in South Africa also raises serious concerns about the integrity of our democracy. The Center for Violence and Reconciliation says with the 54th National Conference of the African National Congress that's scheduled to take place from December the 16th to the 20th, as well as the 2019 general elections, this is just around the corner and over the horizon, the increased competition for political office suggests that South Africa will likely witness an increase in politically motivated violence. Now, for more on this, we joined via Skype by Nomfundo Mogapi, the Executive Director for the Center of Violence and Reconciliation. A very good morning to you and welcome.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Why do you think we have seen this increase in politically motivated killings?
For us, the concern around these political motivated killings emerged from the work that we've been doing on what we call collective violence, where we've been seeing that South Africans as collectives or groups, when they are frustrated increasingly, they tend to use violence as a language to be heard or as a currency to try and get their voices to be heard. And we've seen this initially in service delivery, but we started seeing it during the local government elections where people were not happy with the candidate for the ANC, and we're beginning to say that this violence is now entering political territory. We've seen it in Parliament, and recently we have seen it in relation to some of the provincial elective conferences of the ANC. And for us, as we approach the national ANC policy conference, we are really concerned around the possibility of these eruptions of violence happening, considering the high level of contestations that are existing. And it's only a few days before we actually approach this policy conference. So we are having a seminar today at 4 o'clock to say that as South Africans, we need to have a dialogue about what can be done to ensure that we deal with the early warning signs and that this policy conference, the national policy conference of the ANC, does not become violence, because we know that if the ANC sneezes, the country will catch the cold. And whatever happens in these national policy elections of the ANC will also have an implication when we are going to the national elections in 2019. And we know that violence that is linked with elections has been the downfall of many democracies in our continent. So that's why we thought that as part of the national dialoguing around some of the issues as we are moving towards this important event of the ANC National Conference, we also have to dialogue about what are the possibilities of the violence and how can we ensure that it actually gets prevented.
Now, both the recent South African Local Government Association SALGA report as well as the Moerani Commission have shone that light on the pervasiveness of violent contestation over leadership positions in municipal as well as party political forums, especially in KwaZulu-Natal. What do you think SALGA can do about this, and can they do anything to stop the violence within those municipalities?
Yeah, I mean, the SALGA report is especially important for us because we say that if the leaders of municipalities, municipal management and local government are being targeted in relation to political killings, how much more than ordinary South Africans? And for us, we would like to really, SALGA made it very clear when they were launching their research that for them to prevent this violence, they cannot do it alone. They need provincial government, they need national government to engage with them and the ANC at large to say what are some of the ways in which we can begin to prevent this violence going forward. We have to have early warning signs. We have to have leaders from the governing party speaking now, even before the elections, that no matter what happens, violence is condoned. There has to be plans in place of saying, okay, how do we pick up some of the possible indicators that the situation might be violent, and how do we prevent those in place? We cannot just sit and be defensive and saying, no, there will not be any violence. Our history and what we've seen in the past and the recent researches that you've quoted are indicating that we do need to be concerned as a society in relation to possible violence coming up around political issues.
We have 7 contenders for the leadership of the ANC in December. The intra-party consultations for the political office has had lethal consequences. We've seen that. Seeing that we now have a clearer picture of the front runners, do you think that the violence will subside as we draw closer to conference?
Yeah, look, for us, really, the contestation around the forerunners and the way it's been happening, and already, I mean, we are hearing just now in your own news bulletin that some of those people are taking the ANC into politics, into court. For us, that feeds into the state that will likely lead into further violence. And we are calling upon these leaders themselves, both the current leadership of the ANC and those that are standing up for the leadership, that they must stand up and call on those who support them and condone violence and say no matter what happens, there should never be violence in my name, that I don't want to win at the cost of violence. And that is, we haven't been hearing stronger messages from those in leadership telling us that. And we would like to invite them as we are having this seminar that let this be part of our dialogue, even before we go into the conference itself.
Just briefly, Nomfundo, where will the seminar be held today?
The seminar is going to be in the Constitutional Hill at the Women's Jail here in Braamfontein, and it's going to be from 4 o'clock until 6 p.m. And SALGA will be sharing their report with us, and we will be engaging with it, but also looking at what is the implication of this and what can be done as we are approaching the ANC National Policy Conference.
All the best.
And we invite all South Africans to join us.
All the best of luck, Nomfundo Mogapi. Thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you for having me.
That was Nomfundo Mogapi, the Executive Director, Center for Violence and Reconciliation. As you heard, that seminar will take place today. It will focus on facilitating dialogue on political violence and, of course, looking at intimidation. But that's where we got to leave it for now. As we speak, the suspended head of the Gauteng Health Department, Dr. Bani Salabano, is back on the stand at the Life Esidimeni arbitration hearings for a grilling. Let's go there live.
Why did you act contrary to government policy? Why did you cut costs in relation to citizens? core services? That is the question counsel is putting to you.
Justice Moseneke, can I just point out, before the witness answers his question, that if you look at the document which has just been handed up, it's for the 2017-2018 budget.
So?
It doesn't relate to the period in question.
No, you're off the mark entirely, Mr. Cook, with respect. The MEC says clearly it was always government policy not to cut costs. She emphasizes that there's never been their policy to do so, any time in the past. That it was 2017 is neither here nor there.
Justice Moseneke, I'm just pointing out that the question can be put to the witness, but not in relation particularly to this document, which relates to a budget after the event.
As I indicated earlier, you have no real standing in this hearing. You cannot object except if there is a vital interest of the witness you think is being invaded. The question is legitimate. In 2017, the MEC says it never was government policy to cut costs on core services directed at citizens. What's wrong with that? And she's been asked in 2015, why did you cut costs on core services to citizens? Proceed. Question is legitimate.
Justice, and perhaps if I could just add, for the sake of completeness, that I began the quotation from the MEC where she talks about the past 2.5 years. So this is in the context of a period of time. The fact that she was giving the speech in March 2017 relating to that budget is not of concern to us.
Yeah. Proceed with the question. Would you answer the question, please?
Yeah. Okay. Council says we cut costs. Our thinking that time, we were not cutting costs. And I said it again, we were saying the same cost that would be incurred at a particular, and that is the thinking. And Judge, please understand, like I said yesterday, I'm not defending, I'm explaining the thinking. At that time, we said we are enhancing our revenue. The same services that we have been spending on life health care, we could shift them and be able to get the same value through our own services.
It sounds clever, but it takes us nowhere. You're cutting costs on people's services, but you're trying to save money by giving people services at another place so that you can save money. So council asks you, one of your own, the MEC says it never was government policy. How do you explain that you gave a directive to cut costs on core services? That's the question. What is your answer to that?
That's why I'm saying we move from a different understanding. Our thinking then was that we are enhancing, we are not cutting. You are saying, I understand it becomes this and that, but our understanding...
Why did you move people from life Esidimeni? You told us yesterday already, haven't you?
Yes, I said. There was
we can play the record back to you. In order to cut costs.
I said the fiscal pressure.
Yes. Same thing. It's a fancy word. In order to cut costs or fiscal pressure, right? So council legitimately says to you, besides the constitution and the law, it was not even policy of your government to cut costs on core services directed at citizens. What is your response to that?
I still differ with council on that, the manner in which she's putting it is that we went out there to deliberately cut costs. And our thinking, and I'm saying it again, Judge, with due respect, our thinking was not, as in hindsight, she's able to say that, at hindsight, that our thinking was that if we do things the way we are thinking we'll do them, we will still be able to offer the same services.
Well, tell council, what were you doing? Why did you shut down the contract?
It was not only cost cutting, I did say it yesterday. Also, Auditor General had
No, but
queried
was it cost cutting? Was it?
revenue enhancement. We called it that. I mean,
No.
it cost cutting. No, but you
Sorry.
were not there in those discussions.
No, I'm
isn't
sorry,
it?
Dr. Salabano, because you're playing with words.
No, I'm not.
Yesterday, you said you were under fiscal pressure
Fiscal pressure.
and you needed to cut costs.
To manage costs. Revenue enhancement. That's what we called it.
What does revenue enhancement mean?
It means you look at everything that you have and say, how can we shift? And I said to you, with the same rent, to stretch the rent to get the same value. That's what I said to you.
So you needed
recall me
to
saying
make the money go further.
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
Stretch the rent.
And to do that, you terminated the contract.
But also, please just say to stretch the rent to get the same value. Remember I said that. You agreed with me.
No, I never agreed. No, don't. I'm asking you the questions. You said that you were under fiscal pressure. Money was an issue. Isn't that so?
It's still an issue even now with the department.
Yes, and the MEC for Finance says that indeed there were circulars from National Treasury to guide departments as to how to cut costs.
That's right. I agree with you.
And they were not to be, the departments were not to cut costs at services targeted at citizens. Do you agree with that?
You read it, and this is what, if you're saying I agree with what MEC is saying, yes, it's here, I can see it.
The real question is, why did you go against policy?
No, we didn't go against policy. No. We didn't deliberately go out against policy.
I'm not talking about deliberately. I'm saying, why did you choose to cut costs on services directed at vulnerable citizens? When the policy is you never do that.
We never did that. That's what I'm saying. We never did that.
And that's why they are still alive.
No, Judge, please.
No, but it's a serious matter, and you're playing marbles.
No.
I want to suggest to you.
No, Judge.
Confront the question. You were the person in charge. You are asked the question about policy of your government, and grapple with the issue. Show some serious intention to address the issue that's raised with you.
Judge, with a lot of respect to you and the council, you also have to appreciate the thinking at that time. It is important to appreciate the thinking at that time. When you fast track it to now, it looks like the way you are saying it, but the thinking at that time is we're doing a revenue enhancement program.
And would revenue enhancement involve spending more money?
No.
No.
It involves ensuring that you get your debts from those who are owing you. There were departments that are owing us, going to get that money. It involves some of the things that MEC Chris is talking about, ensuring that we don't spend on anything, no accommodation, no traveling, nothing. It involved looking at other services where we can still do more
for the same amount of money.
By stretching the rent.
For the same amount of money. Is that what, on your understanding?
The budget would be fixed, yes.
Yes, in fact that's true. So then I'd like to ask you this. And in order to put the question to you, I need you to have a look at another exhibit. And it's in the exhibit bundle, and it's Ella 59.
Sorry.
Do you have it?
Yes. Yes, Council, I have it.
And it's an official Gauteng province document, and it is headed, Proposed Development of New 900 Beds Facilities for Mental Health Services to be constructed at Tara, Westkoppies, and Sterkfontein.
That's right.
And it is a document that's signed by you.
That's right, I saw that.
And it was in November 2016.
That's right.
Yes?
Yes, I can see that.
And so you've seen this document before. You recall this document?
I've signed it, definitely, then I went through it.
Does it look familiar to you?
I accept this is probably my document. It's my document. I've signed it.
So the purpose of this is set out in paragraph 3 of the document. It says, the Gauteng Department of Health experiences a high prevalence of mental health conditions in the communities. The communities are exposed to greater risks of mental illness and psychological distress due to varying social factors and pressures. And the second paragraph, the inability to admit and accommodate the identified patients is not because of lack of willingness. The major factor limiting access to mental health care is the limited hospital capacity. And then towards the end of the same paragraph, the Department of Health records indicate that in instant, it requires an average of 1,200 beds capacity additional to the existing to relieve other areas of distress within the mental health care system. The department is therefore commissioning the construction of 3 new facilities. At Tara Hospital, 300 beds. Westkoppies Hospital, 300 beds. And Sterkfontein Hospital, 300 beds.
That's right.
Why were you planning to build and spend money on additional beds while at the same time terminating the beds that were accessible to you at Life Esidimeni?
But if you read it again, let me also read it. It says, Gauteng Department of Health experiences a high prevalence of mental health conditions. So here the idea was that this solution is not a permanent solution. It's not a permanent solution. We need to have a long-term solution, and the long-term solution would be to have facilities that are not outsourced, but insourced, done inside the department. That was a long-term solution. That's the reason.
But would this have stretched the rand?
Well, by stretching the rand, I don't know, it doesn't necessarily mean then you hardly ever spend anything.
Well, I'm trying to understand what you mean by when you spend, when you revenue enhance, when you cut costs, and when you spend.
Okay.
So you've said to us that the department was under fiscal pressure. At the same time that you used that as a reason to terminate the contract with Life Esidimeni, you enter into plans to build 900 beds. And I will come to the cost of the building of the 900 beds in a moment.
I agree, but you would also not
you agree with what? Let's just recall what you agree with.
No, she's saying that we got into an enhancement program, and I said I agree with that. But I'm saying also she cannot be cancelled, my forgiveness. I'm very, very sorry, please. Through you, Judge, it's no disrespect, yes. Cancel, but also you can't begrudge us for planning, because we found there were no plans for in-sourced services. Here, Tara is a psychiatric hospital, Westkoppies is one also, and Sterkfontein. So the plan was, finally we are going to have here, actually, if I were to explain to you the situation in hospitals, then you'll understand why we had to plan this way. We had to plan this way into the future.
This was in November 2016.
That's right.
And your planning, according to your planning, and it's set out under the heading infrastructure planning,
that's right.
The following deliverables are envisaged. And it sets out 10 deliverables.
Where is that? Where are you now, Council?
On the same page, under the heading Infrastructure Planning.
Just give me the reference again, Council, please.
Sorry, Justice, it's LA 59.
LA 59, thank you. I've got it.
Where it says infrastructure planning. That's right.
And it says the following deliverables are envisaged. And it sets out 10 deliverables. And some of them include, for example, at 3.2, accommodation list of the facilities should include mental health care wards for 900 beds, kitchen facilities, ablution facilities relative to the number of users accommodated, training facilities for educational programs, indoor rehabilitation facilities, and outdoor sporting activity grounds, outdoor seating facility under shade. 3.3, all wards should be provided or fitted with temperature regulation systems, automated or manually operated. 3.4, overnight facilities for health caregivers and supporting staff, as opposed to permanent accommodation facilities for staff. 3.5, all facilities should have sufficient security provisions. 3.6, all yards should be fenced with appropriate fencing materials to control and manage movement of patients, and so on and so on. That would be quite costly, wouldn't it?
But that is also noble.
It's also noble.
It's also noble.
No, I'm not questioning that. I'm not questioning the nobility of the motive to build more hospitals. My question is related to cost cutting or cost saving, however you wish to explain it.
Council, I don't understand when you are cutting costs. This is a service. It's a service platform. When you cut costs, you don't shut down the service. I don't understand when you say we are cutting costs, but you still want to build. We still have to provide medication. We still have to provide food for patients. We still have
yes,
to
except
provide,
that didn't take place for the users at Life Esidimeni who were moved.
I don't know why you say that. I don't agree with that.
Well, we've got a ways to go, and I'm surprised to hear you say that you don't agree with that if you've been following these proceedings and if you've read the Ombuds report. My point is this. In an effort to save costs, you terminated the contract. It says so in the termination letter. In the process of doing that, lives were endangered. Would you agree?
In hindsight, yes, I agree.
And so I'm questioning you on the motive, not the nobility of this plan. And what I'm questioning is, why was it necessary to cut costs in relation to those patients when there were plans to spend money at great cost?
Yeah, I hear you, except you are taking one incident and then squeeze it into another incident. The planning here, in government, when you plan to, through you, Justice, when you plan, let's say for a clinic, it's not like in private where you say, I want to have a clinic and then next week you have a clinic. It doesn't work like that. It works through a cycle. So you plan now, you submit it to DID, that is the Department of Infrastructure Development. Then you submit it again to Treasury. Then in that cycle, money is allocated to do the infrastructure planning. So it wouldn't have been, by all intents and purposes, that by 2017, the facilities would have been built. No, it wouldn't have been like that.
No. If there's fiscal pressure, that is the question. To use your words, why do you go plan this grand facility for 920 beds? And just about a few months ahead of that, you had thrown out 1,000, nearly 480 patients out of Life Esidimeni. Yeah. So Council wants to know, why is cost cutting the correct motive for the marathon project when a few months later you plan to build and spend hundreds of millions? That is the inquiry.
Yeah, Chief Justice.
And I just urge you to confront the issues, because we're struggling to understand what was happening in your mind when the marathon project was happening.
Yeah, but
these are not attempts to demean you or anything. Want to understand why would you choose to send people out there, patients who are vulnerable, and a few months later you have this grand plan to build this, to expand these 3 existing mental facilities.
Okay. Justice, it's painful, I must say. Like you put it, we threw them out of life as demand. In real terms, really, that's why I keep on saying the thinking at that time and hindsight again. The intention, there was no nefarious intention to throw out patients. You can't do that. It's not how health systems work. You don't throw out patients. On hindsight, but also this was in November. In the process, we planned. This was not the only plan for NGOs. There are also plans, I can tell you now, they have not been actualized, that we must refurbish hospitals.
No, but the cut of it, Doctor, please.
No, but I'm giving the bigger picture, Justice, that it doesn't mean when you are in a fiscal situation, then nothing happens, people are not eating, there's no medicine, there are no x-rays. All those things are still happening. The expansion of population was actually necessitating that you need to plan further, down the line, not even in my time, to have facilities that the council read well, that are now much better. They've got fencing, they've got all, because we don't have those facilities.
You cut costs
as government.
The council is really saying to you, cut cost on around 1,500 patients at Esidimeni, and you plan a few months later to build this grand facility. Why didn't you wait why didn't you wait? And when the facility is there, move them to this place they deserve, for instance. So she's probing what was happening in the
Just a quick break away from the arbitration process. Let me just remind you quickly of your headlines. 2 of the most important hearings in the country, the Life Esidimeni arbitration hearings and Parley's Eskom inquiry, are currently underway. The Provincial Executive Committee of the ANC in Mpumalanga has described allegations made by ANC presidential hopeful Matthew Spoza as outrageous and fabricated. And bad news for you as a motorist this festive season. You can now, or will now, have to fork out 71 and 60 cents per litre more for petrol as well as diesel, respectively. Those are your headlines. Let's go back to the arbitration process live here in Parktown in Johannesburg.
900 beds. You say in the document, the major factor limiting access to mental health care is a limited hospital capacity.
Where is it, Council, if you
don't
mind?
In second paragraph, under the heading that says strategic intent.
Strategic intent, yes.
The second paragraph?
The inability.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Do you see that?
I see that. Where it says it is not lack of willingness.
Yes.
Yes.
So why is it? Let me ask you this. Was it your policy to deinstitutionalize patients?
The institutionalization is it's government policy.
Was that a motivation for cutting, for terminating rather the contract with Life Esidimeni?
The institutionalization. We implemented policy, that deinstitutionalizing policy. We implemented that.
Was the termination of the contract with Life Esidimeni intended to give effect to the policy of deinstitutionalization?
That process does that, yes.
But how can you be, on the one hand, saying that you are deinstitutionalizing into the communities, and on the other hand, spending these resources into facilities for institutionalizing patients?
Okay, let me explain. You see, if I were to give an example, let me explain, Judge, through you, so that you get what is happening. When a patient is admitted, let's take a patient is admitted at, it's an acute patient. It's an acute patient. We admit that patient in a hospital for a number of days. After that, the patient, we make, the doctors there, I don't. The doctors there make a decision. Is this patient ready to go home or not? If the patient is not ready to go home, then we send the patient to a psychiatric hospital. Those are still acute patients. The problem there becomes then, like you correctly read, that the numbers of psychiatric patients, not mental health, you see there's a distinction there. There's a subtle distinction. For instance, let me give an example. A mental retardation patient is not necessarily a psychiatric patient. A patient with bipolar, yes, you know that.
But we're talking about mental health care. Yes. We're talking about mental health care services in this document.
But you must appreciate the service is not cut into pieces. The service is like a tube. So once a patient is in our hospital and the doctors determine, no, this patient cannot go home, the patient is socially dysfunctional, you take that patient to one of the three, either Tara or Vescopis or Sterkfontein.
Or Life Esidimeni?
No, not necessarily, no. You can still have a patient moving directly from a district hospital directly to Life Esidimeni. You don't, Baneng, for instance, you know Baneng? There are 3 centers around Life Esidimeni. Baneng is still in existence now, still under Life Esidimeni.
Yes, now I'm aware of Baneng.
You are aware of that, still subsidized by government.
Thanks to Mr. Mosinoki, I believe, yes.
No, we wouldn't, you can't touch Baneng. It's, okay, maybe thanks to Mr. Mosinoki, let's leave it at that. But I'm saying, Judge, I was explaining, then in that process, the doctors are the ones who make a determination. They say, this patient socially is not functional. Then they go to one of the three. At that level, in those 3 institutions, the doctors there can still make a determination whether you go home or you keep on coming and going, or they make a determination, this patient will never be able to go home. Now, that's where we now get stuck. The reason being, now there are more patients and more patients coming with the same condition, and the doctors are saying, these patients can never be functional on their own. That's where now Life Esidimeni comes in. So you must understand that, and this is why this document here clearly says, if we don't plan properly into the future, we are going to clog, already the system is clogged. We are already
That's precisely the point. Thank you, Dr. Saban. It's precisely the point, because that's what the letter of 28 April 2015 also pointed out to you, was this chain and of movement of patients, acute patients, into Life Esidimeni. And the psychiatrists themselves said, we have a problem because we don't have anywhere to put the long-term care patients. And by terminating the contract, there's no place for these patients to go. The NGOs are not adequate. That is what they said in that letter. We dealt with it yesterday, right?
And I said I don't argue with the letter also, remember?
Yes,
yeah.
Right. So my question is, why then, in the face of all of that, are you terminating the contract that is clearly needed and at the same time planning to spend many hundreds of millions on building extra beds that are institutional based?
You are saying at the same time, and I'm saying it is not at the same time.
Within months of each other.
No. I'm saying you are saying, and at the same time you want to build. No, it was not going to be built at the same time.
Okay, it doesn't matter when it was. The point is, you were thinking about spending money and you were cutting money. And I'm trying to understand what took priority here. Why did the rights of the mental health care users at Esidimeni not take priority when it came to how you were looking at the money?
Yeah. Council, I wouldn't agree that the rights of the vulnerable, the most vulnerable people, were not taken into account. It's on hindsight when this tragedy has occurred that we can question the thinking. Did it make sense? Was it implemented correctly?
Did it make sense?
At that time, during our thinking, during that time. But now I'm saying, in hindsight, we can start questioning the whole
well, answer
discussion.
me, did it make sense?
At that time?
Yes.
Yes, it did, at that time.
What sense did it make?
The sense was that patients will be relocated to NGOs as part of the institutionalization over a period of time.
Why did you ignore people more equipped than you? Heads of psychiatry would tell you this may lead to fatalities. Why did you ignore them?
Judge, if I read that letter properly, I'm not too sure, Council would tell me. They didn't actually more talk about mortality. They spoke, if I read it casually, they spoke more about if you do this without sorting out the public health, the public health mental system. They said if you don't do that, then you are bound to have re-hospitalization. So there will be too much rebound. That's one of the things that I picked up in what they were saying.
You know,
they said, sorry,
Justice. Go ahead, Council.
What they said is you cannot do this unless you improve and invest in community-based care. There isn't community-based care, therefore this idea of deinstitutionalizing long-term care patients into the communities will, and in their words, these were their words, will have a devastating impact on their health and social well-being. Those were the precise words.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with
that.
But I also
that comes quite close to mortality, doesn't it?
But they didn't say that.
But they didn't say death.
Okay. Do they have to say people are going to die? It's about their care, even when they are alive. Isn't it so, Doctor?
It's so. It's so.
Yes. And your duty is to provide them with the care that the law, our Constitution requires, the Act requires, government policy requires, as you were told this morning. Why do you compromise these norms of our society and place people in NGOs which are, hindsight, you know now, which were not fit for their care?
For the purpose, yes. I agree with you on that one. On hindsight, really, it shouldn't have happened.
Yes, I know we're obsessive about hindsight, but you were warned before, that's the point. You were alerted before. Not once, Council will tell you how many times. And you still steamed ahead. Hindsight, I hear. I'm worried, why did you steam ahead? And something that you have to grapple with because you were the person who was the head of the department. You were the DG of the department. Why did you steam ahead with something that would have adverse consequences and we know, in fact, did?
Yes, it did.
Why did you proceed?
Yeah, but Justice also agree with me that I wouldn't have known that there would be mortalities. I wouldn't have guessed that. If I had known, really, then that would have been unthinkable that I would have gone on. I wouldn't have known. I didn't know, Justice. I didn't know that there will be mortalities.
Did you fear that there may be fatalities?
Did I fear?
That there may be. You didn't know that people would die.
That's what I'm saying. I didn't know.
You had no hint that perhaps did you fear that maybe their health would be affected negatively?
I'm not a clinician. When managers who are experienced...
Are you a medical doctor, Dr. Selebano?
I'm an MBCHB, yes. I'm not a clinician. There's a difference.
I'll come back to that. But my question is, did you have a concern about the negative impact on the health of the patients?
I wouldn't have had that.
You would not have had that?
I don't know how would I have had that, unless you guide me why I should have had that.
Well, I pointed you to one, I'll show you more, but I pointed you to the letter of 28 April 2015. And I'll come back to why else.
But you remember, Council, that I said I don't recall.
You don't remember whether you read it or not. I do recall that. Just before we leave LA 59 and the cost issue, the last page of that document has a paragraph headed Costing and Financial Implications.
Okay.
And it says the department is budgeting 20 million this financial year as the preliminary cost for planning and carrying out all mandatory investigation on identified properties. So 20 million rand just on planning. Then the GDID, is that the Gauteng Department of Infrastructure and Development?
Yeah, your normal, what people call public works.
Yes, is expected and requested to provide Gauteng Department of Health with all development costs required for the remainder of 2016-17 and for 2017-2018. Yes. What was that ultimate budget? What was the budget for all of those deliverables that I read out to you?
I don't understand what you mean by...
What would it have cost to implement this project?
But it says here, you read it, you say, it says GDID is expected and requested to provide GDOH with all development costs required for the remainder of 15, 16, 17, and 17, 18. It clearly shows.
Shows what?
We as health, we wouldn't have known the total cost for developing this. They are the implementing agency.
So you didn't know what this would cost?
They are the implementing agency. Our core business is health services. Their core
so you did not know what it would cost? Is that what you're saying?
Known.
But you did know that it would cost 20 million just to do the preliminary planning?
No. It says the department is budgeting.
Yes.
But when you budget, you are saying, I want to suppose that this thing will cost us this much.
Yes.
Then you say,
so you were expecting that would cost you 20 million rand?
For what?
For planning, for preliminary costs for planning.
Exactly, for planning.
Yes.
I don't understand.
Sorry.
Maybe 20 million sounds huge, but here, the infrastructure people are saying, when I don't know the cost of building, I don't know how it works. The planning, the architecture, I don't know all those things. But if my experts inside the department say to me, let's put this portion for all the planning and all that, who am I to say, no, 20 million is a lot? I can't.
But what you did know was that it was too much at Life Esidimeni, that you were not getting value for money at Life Esidimeni. Yeah, is that right?
Council, you are being unfair. You are comparing things that you should...
I'm trying to understand how you think about value for money. So we're talking about terminating the contract with Life Esidimeni because you need to stretch the rand. Correct?
Yeah, through you, Justice, I think Council is being unfair to me, and I'll explain why. The issue here, we're talking about planning.
You say the question is unfair?
Generally, it's unfair there, yeah. Because here we're talking about planning, and we're talking about budgeting into the future. Now, the council wants me to say we can't plan into the future.
No.
Because here you are again, you are cutting
listen to the question
costs.
and answer it, please. Just listen to the question.
No, you're not understanding me.
Yeah, maybe put it differently, Councillor.
You have determined that a preliminary cost for this plan, however noble this plan is 20 million.
For planning?
Yes, for planning. Nothing more than planning, 20 million rand in that year.
And the answer is yes there, isn't it?
The answer is it's a preliminary costs for planning
yes.
and carrying out all mandatory investigations on identified properties.
Sure,
If we
that
read
is
it
the
that way.
answer. Council will ask
Yes.
the next question. Deal with the question, please. Yes, Council.
And at that same time, you had terminated the contract with Life Esidimeni because you needed to stretch the rand. Isn't that so? That's
right.
what you said.
Okay.
Yes. And how does it square then? Why is it that you couldn't, why was all that urgency and emergency created from the termination of the contract with Life Esidimeni when at the same time there was money in the budget to pay for preliminary plans?
Okay, deal with the question.
Well, I don't know. She says there was money in the budget. Here we are saying we're budgeting for. And I tried to explain the budgeted cycle. We're budgeting for this.
You said 20 million in this financial year.
We're budgeting for 15, 16, 17, and 17, 18. It's a budget cycle.
So could you not have then, in your calculations of this budget that would be available to you, consider using that money for the users at Life Esidimeni?
Well, I wouldn't, whether should I have considered that then and now, it's difficult for me to say.
In hindsight?
But why is it difficult?
No.
Your core mission is health.
But
you are there to provide access to health care. That our constitution requires, the law requires, that just plain morality requires. That's your core. Why didn't you remember how you can best give care to mental health care users at Life Esidimeni?
Yes, I hear you, Justice, and I agree with you. But you also have to agree that unless we move from the same understanding that there was no nefarious intentions. There was no nefarious intentions at all.
No, we're not talking about nefarious intentions.
It's important.
We're talking about caring, taking steps to provide health care. That's what we're talking about. Let's leave intentions out of this. It's a legal thing. It might arise one time or the other in the future. I'm just saying, why is it you can't... Well, I want you to, let's forget about it. Let's not impute anything to you. Please tell us what is going through your mind. And that's what counsel is trying to do. When you talk about money and what you do with patients at Life Esidimeni, what were the considerations? That's what she's struggling to debate with you.
We're talking about money, we're talking about hospitals, clinics. It's not one subsystem, it's a big system. 36 hospitals. We got 36 hospitals. We have 340 or so clinics, 67,000 or so employees, programs, vaccination programs, all these programs. I'm giving you this picture, Justice, so that it is not that it is not please, Justice, and I want to say it with respect to you and the Council and the House here, it is not in a demeaning way that there is no way that any other HOD, including myself, would be saying, I'm just thinking of one thing. You're thinking of how do we make sure that we don't fail on our HIV/AIDS program? It's critical for us. We don't do that. How do we make sure that when patients go to clinics, to hospitals, they still get medication? How do we make sure that when patients are in hospitals, there's still food for them, there's medication for them, doctors are paid? All those things, they constitute the big system of health.
May we add, how do you think the best way to fund NGOs where I have placed patients? Isn't that
it's
vital subset of your big job, isn't it?
I agree with you.
How do I get the proper medication to patients that I have taken out of
NGOs.
Life Esidimeni to
That's
NGOs,
right.
isn't
Yes.
it?
It is.
How do I get care and skill to look after those patients when they are at NGOs, isn't it?
It is. I agree.
Did that happen on your part? Did that happen?
You mean now as an HOD or
As head of the HEDO, as head of the department?
On hindsight, I know that, let me explain again. There's something that you mentioned.
You know what?
Let me explain something that you mentioned, Justice. That I then got to know that actually even our subsidy for NGOs is actually not correct. We take patients to NGOs, but the type of subsidy that we are giving it's not right. I got to know those micro details after the effect.
What is not right about the subsidy?
It's little.
It's too little.
Too little.
And in fact, it wasn't even paid to these NGOs.
For a period of time.
Would you agree?
It was not paid. I know that. I know that. I know that.
So that's why the money and the context of these users, that's why this context of Ella 59 is important for the families to understand this issue of money. There was only 112 Rand per patient allocated as a subsidy.
Which is, like I'm saying, Council, I concede on that one. When
Yes.
I got to know about that, I said, but what are we doing here? How do we expect NGOs to really be able to sustain patients?
But why don't you make sure, doctor, why don't you make sure with your staff they don't expose people on medication or mental health care users 4 months without proper supply of just food? Forget about the rest, just food.
It's tragic. It's tragic. It's
And in that 4
unacceptable.
months, people started dying.
It's
Doctor.
tragic. It's unacceptable. Really, you can't explain
But what's
that.
your explanation as head of department? Why didn't you foresee this?
Well, it's not easy, like I was saying, but let me explain something to you. When I asked, but why were you not paying people here? You get all kinds of explanations. There was some NGOs didn't have this and that, and I said, but no, it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility. If they don't have a tax clearance, we don't put patients there then. We don't do that.
But why did you allow
do
them
that?
to get out of Life Esidimeni when these things had not been tied up, Doc?
Yes, I give it to you, and I agree. I concede to all those things. That these managers are experienced. Dr. Manamela and her team, according to what I know, and not only herself and other programs, they are experienced in doing some of these things. Now suddenly you
She
discover.
says she never moved people in large numbers like this ever.
The department had done that before, I think.
And people died.
Yeah, it's tragic, but there's no excuse.
And you do it again.
When was that? I don't understand. Cancer?
We
No.
dealt with that yesterday.
No. You said
remember?
About moving people.
Yes.
The Life Esidimeni patients.
No. Why shouldn't you know this, doctor? It was canvassed with you yesterday. by Advocate Nkuchana. In a letter written by clinicians to you, in which you...
Oh, yes, yes, the 2009.
Yes, they draw attention to 2009 mass movement of mental health care patients.
Yeah.
You remember that?
I remember the letter now.
The letter was directed to you. And they warn in the letter that these patients died. They give a number there, if I remember, about 11 or so of the patients died.
The letter actually was read by,
yes, indeed.
by the council.
Remember.
I remember that.
Now,
that's why I got lost when you said council.
Now we go back to mass movement of people, and I'm asking, why didn't you take the precautions? About the basics, about food, about clothing. You're going to hear later about the outbreak of typhoid at Takalani. You're going to hear about, all those will be put to you today by council. But why didn't you take steps? You're the chief honcho to say, if this happens, it will happen in a humane way. Why did you do that?
That's why I said, if we move people from life Esidimeni, it's either the same or even much better. I said that. I said that.
No.
I did.
What did you do to make sure it's in a humane way? That's the question.
Justice, I also explained that it is not feasible for any HOD anywhere in the country to be able to run everyday operations with all the programs inside any department. It is not possible. You rely, and I said that to council, you rely on your managers who are experts, who you have to develop a relationship of trust. If you can't trust managers that you work with, who do you trust? Because you can't do these things on your own. You can't.
Who do you think is responsible administratively for this tragedy of 143 deaths? Please engage with the question. It's a very important question.
I would say I take responsibility. I've said it to Professor, that I take accountability. It happened under my watch. I said that, and I'm saying it again. There's no way that if you are a leader, something happens, and then you suddenly want to walk away from it. When it's good, you want to raise your hand and say, no, it's good, then I'm taking it. No, it doesn't work like that. At least for me, it doesn't work like that. I was not there. I was not doing the everyday activities. I can't do that. It is impossible. But it happened under my watch. I was the...
and you accept that the death occurred, the death of 143 of these patients occurred unlawfully, in circumstances which the law does not permit, just to break it down.
143, I mean, but the report when I was in charge, they did talk about 143. I think...
But do you accept that these patients died in circumstances in contravention of the law? The Constitution, the mental health care?
I would say the patients were compromised.
No, but it was unlawful. In circumstances which the law did not permit.
I would say the patients were compromised.
No, but what is your answer to my question? I'm asking you about the law.
I don't know, Justice. I would want to say that I agree the patients passed away, and the report was released.
The government has already conceded that these patients died under unlawful circumstances. Do you differ with them?
But government has agreed. I've not engaged with government. As you know, I'm on suspension, so it's very difficult to me to say what are the reasons why they agreed. I don't know.
Do you agree that these patients died on account of negligence on the part of the department?
On the part of the department, yes.
Which you headed?
Yes. I've taken accountability.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you agree that they've died because of negligent conduct on the part of the department?
Yes, let me say yes.
Counsel?
Thank you, Justice. Dr. Salabano, I'm sorry, just to wrap up for now, the issue of the cost. You agreed that it cost the department 320 Rand per patient per day while the patients were at Life Esidimeni.
That's right.
And you agreed that that was, in fact, value for money.
I'd never engaged with it before then. I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know whether it was value for money?
I wouldn't know. Like I'm saying, I never engaged with Life Esidimeni at that micro level to know what are the cost inputs in that 320. So I don't know.
Are you aware of the report by the Health Advanced Institute?
Yes, I saw that report.
And that was commissioned by the department?
Yes, I remember that.
To look at value for money of Life Esidimeni.
That's
correct?
Yeah.
And they found that, in fact, it was value for money.
Yeah, but also they raised that some of the...
Did they agree that it was value for money?
The report?
Yes,
no,
the Health Advanced
yeah,
Institute.
But you're picking up... I don't have the report now. We could engage
I
on
can
the
put
report.
it to you, if you would like me to.
I would like to have a look at it, actually.
Let me just get the reference for you. It's at volume 4, page 1387.
Page 1.
1387. This is the presentation that's based on the report.
Okay.
The presentation by an official at the Health Advanced Institute. Can I have
That's right.
And if you go specifically to 1394.
You said 13?
9.
Can I quickly browse through it, if it's okay with you, Council?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I'd like to browse through it.
It's quite in order. Take your time and read through it.
Have you seen this presentation by the
Yes.
Health Advanced Institute before, Dr. Selbano?
Well, it was done 14-15.
Yes.
I did have, it was commissioned by one of my managers, and then I got sight of it.
Can I take you to the relevant aspect?
But if you don't mind, it would really help so that I understand the context. Through you, Justice, can I just, I'll finish, I'm just browsing through it.
Yes. Take your time and look at it.
Yeah, I'll browse quickly.
Yes. Of course, council may take you to the recommendation that she is interested in, and you can work backwards from there.
Okay. I'll try and finish one.
It's an extensive presentation, but council is interested in certain conclusions that are relevant to our purposes.
I hear you, Justice, because we also engaged with this report, I recall very well.
Yes.
And we are the ones who actually sent it also to the professor. And there were other good things that we picked up from this report, but there were also other guidances that we picked up from this report. That's why I'm trying to look at it so that I can also
Sure, please do
jog
that,
my memory.
and then you can take questions on it from Advocate Hassan.
Council, I've quickly ran through it, not in detail, but I think, yeah, we can.
Thank you, Dr. Salabano. The aspect I wish to refer you to is at page 1394, and it's the slide that is headed clinical compliance. Do you see that?
Okay.
And it's the last bullet point. And I'll just read it for the record. It says, in general, the services provided by Life Esidimeni is good value for money. HAI believes that sufficient and relevant information has been obtained to enable the Gauteng Department of Health to make sound and evidence-based decisions with regards to the future financial planning and management of the service level agreement. Did you agree with that?
Yes, I saw this statement and I read it, yes.
Yes, and you agree that it was good value for money?
It says in general.
Yes.
Yes, because
in general.
It also says relative, there's a general
yes, in general, good value for money. Yes. And you confirmed this to the health ombud,
yeah,
isn't
we
that
submitted this, we gave it to...
But you also confirmed that to him in your interview with him, isn't that so?
Confirmed what?
In your interview with the health ombud. Let's go there to the interview. Maybe it will be easier. It's Ella 111. It was provided to you yesterday.
Perhaps you can read it. I'll probably recall it.
Do you remember the transcript from yesterday of the interview between yourself and the professor?
I have it with me here.
If you have it, then let's go straight to the page. Relevant page is page 29. Are you there?
All right.
At line 10, it says, and this is you, Dr. Tieko Salabano. You say, in your words, the truth is Life Esidimeni has perfected the business side of managing these patients. Professor Makgoba says, yes. You say, there is a report that you got, I know, from the health guy and Professor Makgoba intervenes and says, Advanced Health. He means the Health Advanced Institute, isn't that so?
That's right.
And then it goes on, you say, yes, I spoke to them. That report will show you how they have managed to manage costs. Professor Makgoba says, no, they are one of the best in the business. Your response, in the world. There is no one to compare with them.
So, yes, that's what I said.
That's what you said.
Yeah. But also remember, why
and them means Life Esidimeni.
That's right, yes.
So they were value for money.
No, but also, if you read, why don't you go through? So, number 25, they have not done extremely well. That is the business side. They have done well on the business side, but they know themselves that they were weak also on the clinical side. It's here also. And their mortality is showing. Now, there is it again. Their mortality also was showing. But then I said, well, it could be explained, I suppose. And then I went on to say, they do not have things like your pharmacists regularly there. You saw the report, I said that to the Prof. And I said, well, let's go on. They do not have a lot of things, notwithstanding, I could understand why. And if you read the whole context, you'll understand. If you read one sentence, it's another thing.
So it was, in fact, not value for money, in your view?
You see, I'm not saying that, but I was pointing out that, yes, they were providing a service.
I'm not suggesting that Life Esidimeni was perfect. Let me make that clear. I'm not suggesting that at all.
I got an impression you are doing that, and I was saying no.
Right. Well, then let's dispel that impression. That is not what I'm suggesting. We've been talking about cost-cutting. We've been talking... You, under fiscal pressure, made decisions, and you were paying for patients at 320 Rand per patient per day. The decision was to stop doing that and to rather pay 112 Rand per patient per day. Correct?
To the NGOs, yes.
Yes, to the NGOs.
But also add, with the added support that they were not doing, they didn't have pharmacists who were also going in that. And I'm not saying 112 is enough. That's not what I'm saying. I just want council also to complete, to say, and I said it yesterday, Justice, I said, in our thinking, we're saying, as soon as we have, and that is again, like I'm saying, council with Justice with respect, you must look at the whole context.
I'm fully aware of the whole context. What I'm saying to you, Dr. Selivano, because I think we need to stay on track, or else we're going to be here for many days.
No, but
so please, can you allow me to put the questions to you and to answer the question.
I'm sorry, Council, if I'm
dispelling, for the sake of clarity about my questions, I'm dispelling your impression that it is my view, and my view is of no consequence here, that Life Esidimeni was perfect. That's not the point. Okay? The point is the money, the cost-cutting and why it was done and so on. That is why I'm putting to you the question. You've agreed 320 per patient per day was being paid, 112 Rand per patient per day was going to be paid to the NGOs, and in fact they didn't get that for some period of time. Do you know what the patients received at Life Esidimeni for 320 Rand per patient per day?
I mean, you'd expect that they should be fed, there should be activities that they're doing, and we would expect occasionally that they should be seen by a psychiatrist, by an OT, by a psychologist, all those things. They were part and parcel of what...
Accommodation.
Accommodation.
Clothing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Medication.
The medication was at the expense of the department. We were giving medication. It's there also.
Transport to hospitals for follow-up visits?
Yes.
That's what, I'm putting that to you because that's what Dr. Mkachwa has told these proceedings.
But he didn't tell you that there was also cross-subsidization. Baneng, they didn't need any transport because they are unable to do that. So the cost of Baneng...
Did they provide transport to the patients for follow-up visits to hospitals?
I suppose they did.
And they supplied daily toiletries, according to Dr. Mkachwa?
They should, yes.
They supplied clothing. They supplied meals. Dr. Mkachwa says they supplied 3 major meals per day and 4 snacks. They provided accommodation.
They provided security also.
Correct, for 320 Rand per patient per day.
But you see, I don't know, I agree. You are now...
You agree with what? I always
that
want to know.
They were providing all those things.
Okay. Yeah. So then the next thing is this. You were then talking about building and there's 900 beds and so on. And yesterday you spoke about the option of buying Life Esidimeni. Do you recall that?
Yes, I tried with the idea of buying.
And you spoke to Dr. Mkachwa about the possibility?
No. During the discussions, I know Dr. Mkachwa, we know each other. And I said, Doctor, is it possible that we were just two of us in an office. is it possible, would you be selling these facilities? Because I know that we have had ups and downs with yourselves in terms of payments. We're not paying them well. And he said, yeah, I can go and ask. Then he went to ask, and then he came back to me and said, yeah, this would be, we would consider selling. Yes.
So Dr. Mkachwa said the following, and I'm just reading from his transcript. He says, the proposal that I then presented to Dr. Salabano was, why don't you just take over our facilities, buy us out so there is continuity of care? And he asked me to go back and put together a proposal. I did go put together and evaluated the facilities, and I sent him the information which had 3 options. 3 options, that would be cash payment, a 5-year plan, and a 10-year plan. We never heard from the department.
Yeah, Dr. Mkachwa pretends as if now he's the one who actually said, can we do that? I asked Dr. Mkachwa in my office with him, like I say, I know him, and I said, would we consider some of these options? And I said, in the discussion with the prof, it stalled. Why? Because then I said yesterday to...
So did you ask him to make a proposal?
I asked him to give me what would be the cost of the 3 centers.
And did he do that?
He came back. He orally told me, as far as I recall, he orally came back.
And then you say it stalled.
It stalled in me. I said it yesterday that it stalled because I didn't take it any further.
Why not?
Myself. I don't know. I mean, I just didn't take it any further. It stalled. And I told Council Lister, and I said it to yourself, Justice, that it's...
You know what remained in my mind, in your answer, was that, in fact, you had enough money to buy Life Esidimeni cash.
I did say that I asked budget, as he was going to check, I did say that I asked budget, if we were to scrape around, would you be able to get something? They came back to me and gave me a figure. Yes, I said that.
You said
they said
and
yes.
In fact, lo and behold, you were surprised. In fact, I have the money to buy...
We can get the money, yeah.
Cash. As they say in the township, to buy this thing cash, right? So you could have bought it cash. Why didn't you? Ultimately, that's where council will go.
You know,
why did you prefer to displace the patients rather than buy the place and preserve it?
I hear you. You know, I mean, why I didn't think of pulling that thing through, it just stalled in my...
But, Doc, you paid to be the decision maker. That's what leaders are. They make decisions.
Yeah, but I hear you,
But
Justice.
why didn't you make, or did you make the decisions? Why didn't you make it? You should know that it's something big. It's something ahead of deciding to displace nearly 1,500 patients.
Justice, I hear you, and I, with respect, I hear you. But also, let's not, as it's stalling in my head, it's not like I deliberately never thought about it. It stalled. There were other. I mean, I didn't fathom even for 1 minute that there will be such a tragedy. That's, you know, I mean, if you think about it now, if you ask me, how do you feel about that now? I just wish God I could have just bought these things at that time.
Yes, I'm with you. So, why didn't you do it? I mean, so it's an obvious, rational question, given the consequences that followed.
Yeah.
Nobody has insight into what the future might be.
holds, yes.
Fair enough. But once we sit there now, we must ask, he is appointed and paid to make decisions. That's what a DG or HOD is about. And it was a relevant decision. It was one that would have spared us the tragedy.
Correct.
And it's fair to ask you, why didn't you make the decision?
Like you correctly said, I wish I had, and you said, if I had the ability to see into the future, to say, hey, there will be a tragedy, then at least I'm sure I would have made that decision.
But you know what the law requires of you? To take precautions, not to cause future harm. You know that.
Exactly.
You don't always have to know everything about the future, but the law expects every one of us, particularly those who wield public power, to take steps to avoid harm,
Fair.
particularly to citizens. You know that.
I agree.
Yeah. Council.
Thanks, Justice. I mean, Dr. Selebano, you say if you could have seen into the future, you would have done so. You would have, it wouldn't have stalled. You would have acted on the idea of purchasing life Esidimeni.
Not only that, probably if I could see into the future, I would have even stopped.
Not even terminated
I would
the
have
contract.
Stopped the whole thing.
Stop. Okay. So you don't recall too much about the April 2015 warnings, but in June 2015, you were informed of the risks again, and.
Can I have sight?
Yes, I'm going to refer you there. It's Ella 2, the annexures to the Ombuds report, Ella 2. And it's at page 47.
I generally get...
Let me get one of my staff members to help you there to the correct page. King.
Is that the one, Baki? Which page, Council?
47.
47.
It's on the letterhead of the South African Society of Psychiatrists.
That's right.
Have you found it?
I found it.
Does this letter look familiar to you?
I think I know about this letter. I know about this letter that went to the MEC. I know about it.
Have you read it before?
I should have read it. It went to the MEC.
And it was also sent to you?
Yeah, I should have read it. It was sent to also Dr. Mazamisa.
Yes.
Ms. Lesile Rutla, Manamela.
Yes, and to you.
Yeah, and myself.
And it's dated June 2015.
That's right.
So it was before the termination of the contract. And if I could just take you through this letter. The first paragraph, the first big paragraph, starting the public sector. Do you see that?
The public sector, yes.
Yes. What the psychiatrists say here is the public sector psychiatrists of Southern Gauteng have several concerns about the reduction of beds, restrictions on admissions, and planned closure of the Life Esidimeni care centers. And they therefore request an opportunity to comment on the matter and so on. The next paragraph says the following. They start to set out their concerns. Starting off with the first one. They say, primarily, we are concerned that the reduction of beds at Life Esidimeni will have unintended, costly, negative consequences. As stated on page 16 of the NMHPF, which means the National Mental Health Policy Framework and Strategic Plan. And they
still in the public sector?
No, so the paragraph below that?
Okay.
Primarily.
Okay.
Primarily, we are worried that the reduction of beds at Life Esidimeni will have unintended, costly, negative consequences.
Right.
As stated on page 16 of the National Mental Health Policy Framework, and they quote from the policy, deinstitutionalization has progressed at a rapid rate in South Africa without the necessary development of community-based services. This has led to a high number of homeless, mentally ill people living with mental illness in prisons and revolving door patterns of care.
Right.
Do you see that? We believe, it continues, that these problems will be exacerbated by the reducing chronic care hospital beds at community mental health services, as community mental health services are still insufficiently developed to cope. And it goes on. That's the crux of that. If you turn over the page, there are numbered paragraphs.
That is 48, right?
There are numbered paragraphs. And it's just ahead of the numbered paragraphs, it says, they say rather, we would like to highlight the following points. And they start with number 1. The mental health care users who require placement in chronic care with 24-hour psychiatric nursing and on-site occupational therapy do so because of the severity of their psychiatric disorder, lack of insight, poor level of functioning, inability to live independently, and
away from the arbitration processes live to Esidimeni. It's 1100 hours Central Africa time. Welcome to the third hour rather, of Newsroom. My name is Elvis Preston.
And I'm Kendall Mahamat.
We'll be with you until 12 o'clock, but our question today, we focus on the non-profit organization Right to Care, who says that equity in healthcare will only be achieved when the rights of all population groups, including lesbians, gay, bisexual, transgender, as well as intersex people, and even sex workers, are fully respected, Kendall.
Exactly, and that's why we're asking you, how do we deal with the stigma and discrimination against the LGBTI community affected by HIV and AIDS?
Well, let's take a look at what you're telling us on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom.
Linda comes in with, by minding your own business. Simple and to the point.
Well, there you have it. You can keep on coming, keep on sending us and we'll read them. But the suspended head of the Gauteng Health Department, Dr. Brani Silabano, he is facing that grilling today. Of course, 143 people died, mentally ill patients that had died during that process when they moved them to unregistered NGOs.
He's actually admitted that it's due to negligence that this happened. And we're asking you, does his testimony, Dr. Brani Silabano's testimony at the Life Esidimeni arbitration hearings, make sense to you at all?
132 votes in, 83%, Kendall, are saying no, and only 17% agree.
Now, let's see what's being said. Let's see how they're backing up these votes.
Killjoy says, not being arrested, charge and have your day in court for the deaths of over 140 people that we know of, doesn't make sense to me, says Killjoy.
Nazim Krupum says, he doesn't make sense at all. I don't know why they're wasting their time with people like him.
Well, there you have it. We'll read all those comments as we continue. But it's raining goals in the Absa Premiership last night. Well, there was a drought before that.
Yeah, man, we've had several openings where we're talking about the goal drought in the PSL. And all of a sudden, in 3 matches, we get 10 goals being scored in the Absa Premiership. Yes, you heard it right, 10 goals. So I want to find out, what are your thoughts on what you've just found out?
Let's take a look at what you're telling us. This one from Nazim says, I wish they can continue like that because our players miss easy chances.
No, absolutely correct. Yeah, they miss too many of those easy chances, don't they?
Score more. But right now, let's get down to business and take a look at your news headlines. The suspended head of Gauteng Health Department, Dr. Brani Silabano, says he takes responsibility for the deaths of the mentally ill patients. Members of the Public Enterprise Committee have vowed to force the Deputy Minister Ben Martins to appear before the parliamentary inquiry into Eskom. And the Provincial Executive Committee of the ANC in Mpumalanga has described allegations made by the ANC presidential hopeful Matthews Phosa as outrageous and fabricated. Those are your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate how the ball's rolling on the soccer field.
Yeah, well, it's actually rolling into the back of the net for once. It's something we're all celebrating. All football fans are saying, so what took so long? Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today.
Oh, what a ball!
Percy Tao's brace helps Mamelodi Sundowns break the PSL's goal drought as they crush Maroka FC 4-0 to go top of the log.
Oh, it's a good ball! Oh, it's a blinder of a ball to complement the beauty of a run. Pass it down with his second, Sandals with their fall.
Pogba, it's a nice ball forward. It's an excellent finish from Romelu Lukaku. 1-1.
2 second-half goals by Romelu Lukaku and Marcus Rashford secure an UEFA Champions League last 16 berth for Manchester United for the first time since 2013.
And here's Mata. Rashford, will it be 2 in a minute? Oh, yes, it will.
It's happened quick. He's chopped it on. It's done and dusted.
A jubilant Australia take a 2-0 series lead in the Ashes with a resounding 120-run victory over England in Adelaide. All this and more we've got for you later on, about 11:35 or so. Do stay with Elvis as he's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour. The suspended head of Gauteng Health Department, Dr. Barney Silabano, is back at the Life Esidimeni arbitration hearings in Parktown here in Johannesburg, and he's facing more questions about his role in the botched relocations that left 143 mentally ill patients dead. Yesterday, Silabano told the hearing that the decision to terminate, the long-standing contract with Life Esidimeni was taken to save costs due to pressure from the National Treasury. He, however, admitted that there was no system to keep track of what was happening at the NGOs. This after he was asked why he did not know that more than 76 people had died towards the end of the year, as he kept on referring to the 36 he had learnt of in July.
I wouldn't agree that the rights of the vulnerable, the most vulnerable people, were not taken into account. It's on hindsight, when this tragedy has occurred, that we can question the thinking. Did it make sense? Was it implemented correctly?
Did it make sense?
At that time, during our thinking, during that time. But now I'm saying, in hindsight, we can start questioning the whole
well, answer me,
discussion.
did it make sense?
At that time?
Yes.
Yes, it did, at that time.
What sense did it make?
The sense was that patients will be relocated to NGOs as part of the institutionalization over a period of time.
Why did you ignore people more equipped than you, heads of psychiatry, who tell you this may lead to fatalities? Why did you ignore them?
Judge, if I read that letter properly, I'm not too sure, counsel would tell me. They didn't actually more talk about mortality. They spoke, if I read it casually, they spoke more about if you do this without sorting out the public health, the public health mental system. They said if you don't do that, then you are bound to have re-hospitalization. So there will be too much rebound. That's one of the things that I picked up in what they were saying.
You know, they said, sorry,
you
Justice.
go ahead, Counsel.
What they said is you cannot do this unless you improve and invest in community-based care. There isn't community-based care. Therefore, this idea of deinstitutionalizing long-term care patients into the communities will, and in their words, these were their words, will have a devastating impact on their health and social well-being. Those were the precise words.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with
so
that. But I also
that comes quite close to mortality, doesn't it?
But they didn't say that.
But they didn't say death.
Do they have to say people are going to die? It's about their care, even when they are alive. Isn't it so, Doctor?
It's so.
And that is why we're asking you this question on our poll that we conduct today. Does Dr. Barney Silabano's testimony at the Life Esidimeni arbitration hearings make sense? You heard the judge asking the very same question that we are asking you. So far, 136 votes in, 84% are saying no, 16% are saying yes. You're also talking to us on this one from Nhlanhla that says, crimes were committed, no arrests made, only fancy, expensive talk shows in the name of commissions are set. Those participating in these talk shows will pocket the victims, won't get anything but only biscuits and tea. they get during lunch breaks during these sessions. There are no justice, says Mahita. Ikononazo says the doc is lying and she's shifting the blame. It is unfortunate. He and the rest must be prosecuted for first-degree murder. They did all this purposely, and their attitude bear testimony too. They lost humility, and Africanism is dirty to the core. So says Ikononazo. Pindola says, no one is above the law. They should be punished from what they did, for what they did. Hashtag prison time for everyone involved. Those are your comments. Keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. Remember, of course, you can do that all the time. 24 hours, you still can vote also on the poll. Now, members of the Public Enterprise Committee have vowed to force the Deputy Minister, Ben Martins, to appear before the parliamentary inquiry into Eskom. Martins, who was due to appear before the committee today, has written to the committee indicating that he had only received the invitation 2 days before he was due to appear. Martins had earlier written to the committee complaining of bias and not being given a chance to give his side after the former Eskom company secretary, Suzanne Daniels, implicated him.
The time for niceties is now over. We have exhausted all possible niceties that we could with the minister. The minister is the one who jumped up and down screaming foul and insisted that the deputy minister, thank you, screaming foul and saying that he must appear before this committee. I think my colleague, Dr. Luenge, is absolutely right. Mr. Martin certainly wasn't on the radar for any questioning. He insisted on coming here. Now we have reason to believe that he must answer questions. So, Chairperson, I would like to move that today, this committee, once we break through Advocate Vanara, immediately issues subpoena, and that the Deputy Minister learns the hard way what happens when you take on a committee of Parliament that's constitutionally mandated.
It is for this committee to decide whether you will attend and what questions you will answer. This is an inquiry, and it's not for the executive to decide whether they're going to account to Parliament or not, and in what manner. Here he is deciding in what manner he will account to Parliament, and I find it totally unacceptable. He, as was indicated by other speakers, jumped up and down when we had evidence before us as to his involvement and insisted to come and explain. Once you want to come and explain, then it opens you up to questioning, in determining and getting to the bottom of the facts. So I am fully in support of the fact that we have invited the Deputy Minister to come. He has failed to appear, and that we should then make use of the subpoena provisions to compel him to appear before the committee and answer his statement, as well as questions surrounding the allegations against him.
I think he needs to know that we are not receiving written submissions only. Like sometimes in court, you get court papers, written papers, and the lawyers would know, and the judges decide on the basis of written papers. Here we want oral evidence to give those that come here an opportunity to explain themselves on the basis of written submissions. So I fully support the fact that the Honourable Deputy Minister should be subpoenaed and reminded of the roles and obligations of this committee and his rights as well. But he certainly has to come before this committee as early as our first sitting in January.
He's the one who wrote a letter to us by challenging us that we're not giving him an opportunity to come and explain. And he's got no problem with speaking that guy because he's been calling media briefings trying to justify his stories here. So he must come to this committee. He behaved like a drama queen here, calling media briefings and everything. So we must subpoena that drama queen. He must come here and answer questions.
Well, talking about drama, as we speak, the acting Eskom chair is continuing with his testimony before the parliamentary inquiry into Eskom, into malfeasance and state capture. Let's go there live.
I'm not with you with the question. Did you ever consider any application from Mr. Brian Molife that would allow him to live in whatever manner?
Yes, I think Molife submitted a retirement letter to HR and to the chairperson.
Did Mr. Molife resign or retired early? Is that what you approved as the board?
What we know is that he submitted a retirement letter. Even though maybe whatever he said in the media, it sounded as if it's a resignation. And also in our meeting somewhere in November 2016, I think Dr. Ngubane in that particular meeting addressed as if Molife resigned. Taking into account the records that was recorded and what was recorded on CIPC, SIPS, it was indicating that he resigned because they asked the copy of the minute and they were given the extract of the meeting of that particular day.
Are you aware of the 30 million surrounding the departure of Mr. Molife from Eskom?
Yes, I'm aware of it.
Is it justifiable?
No.
What is the stance that you actually took? And also, what is it that you think Mr. Molife wanted to achieve when you employed him as a permanent employee, when you knew it for a fact that he was not supposed to be employed as in that manner?
I think there was a concern from Mr. Molife that he raised with the chairperson then, which was indicating that he could not accumulate a pension because of the 5-year contract that was taking place in the previous jobs. And it needed to be considered because initially he was given a job which he assumed it was a permanent job with no limit in terms of the 5-year span. And from that, there was a discussion at People in Governance to look at the other mechanism to deal with the matter. And the letter which was said that it was sent to the minister to request whether we can look at, say, if he completed the first 5 years and he cannot get a pension anywhere, can we consider buying the additional service so that he retire at the time?
Lastly, Chairperson, at Eskom, there are over 40 construction companies that are doing work at Eskom. And in those construction companies, there is no indication as to whether any of them benefited in a manner that the Tegeta company did access a pre-payment of plus minus 600 million. Is that so?
No, that's not correct. The prepayment has been done on the previous eras in several mines or several issues, depending on the issues that were pertaining, so that we were able to pay upfront. It was not only together it was not the first time that we prepaid.
So are those companies locally based, or the majority of them are local
based?
Mr. Koza, there's a request that you speak to the mic. You're too soft for recording. Thank you.
They are locally based.
Oh, let me stop there, Chair, in the interest of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for saving us time. Let me set up, okay? Honorable Mazzoni, it's your turn.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Koza, before you started at Eskom, you were at Telkom, am I correct? And tell me, when you joined Eskom, did you submit a CV before you were employed?
Yes, we did submit a CV.
And who employed you at Eskom? Who employed you?
At Eskom?
Yes.
The minister.
The minister, so Minister Brown or Minister Gigard?
Minister Brown.
Minister Brown. At Telkom, when you worked there, did you work with Kuben Moody?
Yes, he was a sales rep.
And were you and Mr. Moodley ever business partners? Were you and Mr. Moodley ever business partners?
No, we're not business partners.
Not business partners. Do you know Mr. Mark Pomensky of Blue Label?
Yes, I do.
And did you ever provide him airtime contracts when you worked at Telkom?
Yeah, he had a airtime contract.
So he had airtime contracts. Tell me, did you know Mr. Salim Issa before you joined Eskom?
No.
No, so you'd never met Mr. Salim Issa?
Before, no.
No. And when you arrived at Eskom, were you surprised to find Varoshni Naidu, Mark Pomensky, and Romeo Khumalo on the board? Because, you know, they come from Blue Label and Vodacom and, you know, all connected. Were you surprised to find everyone there?
Not really.
Not really? So the gang just moves together?
Because they were also my colleagues at the time.
Okay. Did you know these board members? We know that you knew Mark Pomensky before. Did you know Varoshni Naidu before? Did you know Mr. Romeo Khumalo before?
No, I didn't know Romeo Khumalo.
Not? Okay. Once you joined Eskom, were you ever at a meeting of the board that was chaired by Mr. Salim Issa, where you were addressed by him?
No.
So Mr. Salim Issa has never addressed any meeting of board members, be it formal or informal?
No.
Not? All right. Let's talk about the Denton's report. Now, Eskom famously refuses to give us a copy of the original Denton's report. So could you tell us today, as the acting chair, what pieces of the Denton report suggestions have you implemented so far?
All the elements of the actions that were expected to be done within the report has been completed by management.
Can you give me 3 examples of actions that have been implemented?
There were actions that were supposed to be taken within the coal, because at the time, I think the coal contracts were not coming through the BTC because of the arrangement that was done by the contract that was signed 2008, approved by the BTC committee. And then we were able to take it back so that they come back into BTC so that we can see what type of the contracts that are getting done.
Okay, that's one.
And the issues in terms of the build program, that we had to expedite the build program, which was done. We put the action plan, and so that we're able to control that.
And 3?
And 3 was to address liquidity and the issues that were pertaining to the liquidity. We put a program in terms of the saving cost within the organization and deal with the liquidity as well.
So from the 3 examples you've given me, clearly the Denton's reports had some pretty serious problems that they found within Eskom. And obviously certain people have to take responsibility for that. Could you tell me if any disciplinary action has been taken against anyone in accordance with the Denton's report?
Not specifically to the Denton's report, but I think the issues that were getting picked up when we were dealing with the Denton's report in different areas where we find that procedurally things were not done, management were taking disciplinary actions against individuals.
And can you name for me, just let's make it easy for you, name 2 individuals that action were taken against?
I can't specifically indicate because it was happening within management, and there's nothing happened at the executive level that could have been brought to our attention.
Now, let's talk about this board that's appointed at Eskom. Very new board comes in, people are dropping like flies, massive controversy, Gupta leaked emails come out. Do you feel that your board was appointed correctly, or do you think that your board was appointed for convenience?
I cannot express my feeling, but I think when the Gupta leaks came up, etc., and certain people felt uncomfortable and they chose to resign.
And do you not think that perhaps there should have been disciplinary action taken against, or at least investigations against those who were implicated in the Gupta leaked emails?
Yes, we do.
You do. So you agree with us on that. Okay, I'm glad we're finding each other on this. Now, we know for a fact that Eskom lied to Minister Brown. She has said as much, and she's produced evidence that you, as Eskom, the board, lied to her about what was happening with Trillion. And in turn, she then lied to me in an answer to my parliamentary question. Do you think that the truth about Trillion would have ever come out had I not asked those specific questions that forced the circle of lies?
Yes, it was going to come out because it was already raised by the external auditors during their audit when they picked it up that said the payment was paid not against the contract.
Then how as a board do you justify lying to Minister Brown when she asked you about your connection to Trillion?
At the time, I think the information that was given, it was collated from the financial department, and it was passed through to the spokesperson of the company as such.
So
And
from
when
the
we
financial, I'm sorry, I am going to rush you on this because my time is limited. So when you say the financial department, does that mean Mr. Anuj Singh lied to the minister who then in turn lied to me?
Yes, he's the one who signed.
He's the one.
Well, there you have it. That's the acting Eskom chair continuing with his testimony before Parliament's inquiry into Eskom malfeasance there. But right now, as we speak, here in Johannesburg in Rosebank, there you have it. These are some of the opposition parties. They are talking about the state of coalition governments, the DA, COPE, the ACDP, the FF+, UDM, they all there. Let's go there live.
The people. So I'm delighted and I'm happy that what we have arranged, what they've decided on is working very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, dear friends. We have really come to say to you that we are thrilled with what we have achieved as coalition governments in those towns and cities in which we have taken control. We recognize that South Africa is a huge and complex country with 9 official languages, tribal formations, different terrains from north to south, east to west. It is quite clear at this stage, especially as the tripartite alliance has begun to break apart in very many critical areas, that the search for the road to South Africa that will provide a better life for all is in full swing. With the coming elections, there'll be even bigger formations. Very many who will seek to find common ground to work together, pointing to the fact that it was a very wise move that we did by identifying minimum common objectives amongst ourselves, and on the basis of which we could work together. From now on, we can only strengthen this common vision. And we are quite confident that there will be increasing numbers of formations coming into the coalition arrangements that we initiated after the local government elections. And with that, I'd like to say that we are happy to share with you our perspectives as you go forward. Thank you.
Let me swap with you. Make your life easier.
I will speak in Afrikaans and English. From my side, firstly, good morning to everyone. Ons moet vir mekaar sê, Suid-Afrika is 'n jong demokrasie. 23 jaar in die lewe van 'n mens is 'n hele aantal jare, maar 23 jaar vir 'n demokrasie is baie jonk. En eintlik is ons bly dat in so 'n jong demokrasie ons al die geleentheid het dat koalisieregerings gevorm word in Suid-Afrika. 'n Koalisieregering is 'n uitvloeisel juis van die kiesstelsel wat Suid-Afrika het, naamlik die proporsionele kiesstelsel. En dit is tot voordeel van die mense van Suid-Afrika dat elke kiezer wat gaan stem, kry seggenskap in die regering. We must also say to each other that the coalition formed by different parties from last year's local government elections is still also young. And of course, there will be growth pains accompanying that coalition. For instance, we must remember that we inherited a budget from previous governments in local governments. It was only by July this year that the coalition government could submit a new budget. And you will see at the achievements already that has been achieved by the coalition government. We always say that a coalition government is not a speedboat that you can turn around quickly. It takes time. And if you look at the achievements, it is proof to the electorate and the people of South Africa that we must remember it is not a matter of who's going to win the ANC conference leadership. The people of South Africa has got another choice, and that choice is coalition government. And therefore, we as leaders in Frontier have an extra responsibility to ensure that those matters that is important to the people of South Africa, specifically when it is about the taxpayer or the money of the taxpayers, that there is an alternative and everybody can have a voice in future. We believe in 2019, and that's our, can I say, goal, to ensure that no single party will have a majority, so that everybody is below 50%, and it is possible that the ANC can become below 50%, and then we as a coalition can become a new government. Thank you.
Dankie.
Let me just at this point just highlight a number of things that are key. What is crucial to undertake is the fact that many people have looked at what is happening at Nasrec and assumed that that is an election of a government. It's only an election for the leadership of the ANC, and whatever that does. Our greatest concern is that the people of South Africa face profound challenges. South Africa is a nation where one half experiences the benefits of freedom, another half lives in absolute poverty. More than 53% of our citizens live in a universe where, in fact, mothers are boiling weeds to feed their kids. So the conditions upon which we operate are such that as 9.4 million South Africans are unemployed, we have to find a new alternative. We have to bring that change. And that's what catapulted people in 2016 to bring about that change. They expressed that change, as so eloquently put by Ntatele Kota, in expressing their votes to a diversity of political parties. They gave an opportunity for an expression of the diverse rainbow South Africa, where different political parties of different persuasions could come together, bound by a number of key values that drive that sense of unity. The ideals that say we will always fight for constitutionalism, that no single organization can rise above the Constitution. And in reflecting on some of the events last year, you can remember we marched together even to the Constitutional Court in fighting to ensure that Parliament does its job. It was the work of the opposition working together to say, how do we account on that basis? How do we ensure that the rule of law is upheld? How do we ensure that we continue to deliver quality services to our people? And how do we ensure that we cut out corruption in any of its formats and work hard to ensure that the cities that the people of South Africa have entrusted to a coalition government in fact, are resilient enough to deliver quality services to our people. This has not been an easy start, but it has produced an alternative for South Africa. And without taking too much time, I wanted to highlight some of the key issues that have come on board. I chose specifically to look at the metros and table with as we worked with leaders, some of the reports from the governments that are before us. You will get this particular presentation with you that highlights some of the key achievements that have taken place in the metros, because we also have coalition governments in different formats at other municipalities and few municipalities. So, very quickly to highlight, you know the respective political parties that are part of the coalition. It's important to note that the EFF are part of, they remain a part of the opposition and vote for the coalition on an issue-by-issue basis, and have been key in other various municipalities and metros that have come on board. So, in standing with that, let me start with the city of Tshwane. Tshwane inherited a budget deficit of over 2 billion rand. We then inherited a metro that, as we highlighted, there were over 900 people who were working in the metros, in the mayor's office. Each executive of Tshwane had procured a fancy German luxury vehicle for the MMCs. When the coalition government came together, we said we needed to stop that. We've narrowed down the Tshwane mayor's office. We've ensured that we begin to plug that 2 billion rands deficit, and we've taken some initiatives. One of those have been the selling, quite deliberately, of the metro of the mayor's house, because we felt their city, the previous administration, had taken 12 million rands, invested in the refurbishment of that house, and we literally, when you derive value, we realized that it was a bottomless pit of investment, and we recently sold it for 5 million rands. That 5 million rands will be used to deliver low-cost housing for the people of the city of Tshwane. We've also taken a stance where we've provided over now 23,000 extended public works work opportunities have now been created in the city of Tshwane, beginning to bring hope to the disempowered South Africans, more specifically young South Africans. We've attracted an enhanced Tshwane Metro Police Department, where we are beginning to see that, in fact, more police are coming on board. And if you remember in my opening, I said they'd procured German luxury vehicles. We've taken those vehicles and given those to the Metro Police of Tshwane so that they can continue the fight against anti-cable theft, fight against drug abuse in the metro, and continue the work there. And there is already a marked decrease in crime that is taking place in Tshwane. We've still got a long way to go. The work still has to be done. The government has already started to deliver 2,804 title deeds since assuming office, and there is a broad code agreement that by the end of the year we should issue an additional 6,000 title deeds as we go. Arieng as a project has begun, where in fact we are offering public transport to the citizens of Tshwane, and one of the key initiatives that will come from there is that we want to allow for poor South Africans to be able to go into the Tshwane Metropolis public transport system so that they can go find work opportunities as they go. Already now, we've adjudicated over 1.5 billion rand is budgeted to go into transport. We've launched a new Tshwane Hope Line, and that Hope Line seeks to help residents in fighting drug abuse, where young people can be able to call in and give intelligence to the municipality so that we fight against drugs. I could cite a number of these issues, but obviously we've got to continue the fight against corruption in the city of Tshwane. We've got to ensure that we build an administration that is capable to be able to deliver for the citizens there. We have inherited often a fairly bloated state, and a state that we have to fight to make sure that we drive delivery on that issue. Moving on to the city of Johannesburg. Johannesburg has come together where in fact we established under General Sibiya a new Hawks unit. That unit has set itself up to deliver and fight against corruption. Many of you will know that we fought against corruption wherever it occurs, whether it's been with even some of our own people have been investigated by this particular unit, because we will not tolerate corruption in any way. Already now that unit has dedicated to fighting corruption of over 2 billion rands. There's been an exposure of corruption in the broad administration to the value of 16 billion rands. So even these motions of no confidence that come through are not designed to fight against a particular government or a mayor. They are designed to bring back corruption to the city of Joburg, and we've got to fight. In working with small enterprises, we've engaged over 7,000 small businesses helped in the SMME hub. There's already an 88 million rands adjudication towards fighting against potholes in the city of Johannesburg. Already, we've established a new K9 unit that will focus on, that has already started to make 597 arrests and seized over 100 kilograms of drugs. Over the last 2 weeks already, 1,600 police officers have been put in the JMPD office. To cite but a few. The program of public transport and Metropolis has already begun. Already now, in Metro Bus, we've added over 50% of new fleet that have come on board. This is a clear indicator. Lastly, in our focus in dealing with poor South Africans, we wanted to ensure that clinic hours are extended for longer hours to make sure that we can make sure quality healthcare is given to people over weekends and certainly in extended hours. Lastly, the city of Joburg, if it had to face up to a fire, you'd discover very quickly that there were no emergency vehicles that were on the table. Therefore, its natural effect has meant that now we've procured over 28 new state-of-the-art firefighting initiatives and wanted to ensure that government in itself can deliver in any case of emergency, with now 160 firefighters being added to it. In last metro I want to look at is the metro of Nelson Mandela Bay. If you want to read a little bit more about Nelson Mandela Bay, I'm not here to, we spoke about the president's keepers. Now you can read another book called How to Steal a City. In that book, it chronicles the role of various respective players in how that city was stolen and money and revenue was stolen there. I'm happy to report that the city's capex rate is now sitting at over 93% and boasts a higher collection rate than there's ever been before in Nelson Mandela Bay. For the first time, Nelson Mandela Bay now has a government in place that has now a metropolis force that is in place. What was happening there before, you had a farce and different various role players trying to control that. We in Nelson Mandela Bay are confronted with a profound challenge of corruption that is taking place and the war in KwaNobuhle is taking place. I'm happy to report that, especially for poor citizens, 12,000 residents are now getting running water and toilets in their homes for the first time, bringing dignity to the people, especially in informal settlement. The coalition government there has already brought 800 bursaries worth now 34 million rands to give to young people in respective communities. Before the end of this particular year, 35% of all buckets in South Africa were in Nelson Mandela Bay. Now, since the coalition government, we've eradicated 4,000 already and have committed to eradicating all bucket toilets by the end of this current year in Nelson Mandela Bay. It's clear that one of the key flagship programs, not only has it been the program of Arambe, but also the program of Operation Buisa Estima, has been a program that seeks to rebuild houses and give dignity to people who didn't have homes. Already over 2,000 title deeds have been delivered in this particular project, and we are hoping that we want to eradicate the very extensive housing list that has shown that currently standing at 80,000 and to root out corruption in all housing lists. Fellow South Africans, I think it's clear that what we sit here today is, despite the challenges that we've experienced, we believe coalition governments are the future of South Africa. We believe that if we stick to our values and our principles, we can be able to achieve a change in South Africa and offer South Africans a credible alternative going towards 2019. We are at war against corruption. We are fighting deliberately to build an economy that is able to create work opportunities for our people. And as you saw what happened in Metsimaholo quite recently, it's clear that the ANC is not going to be easily get over 50%. We can bring that change. And ultimately, as you work out the configurations of local government, we can have a practice to ensure that that model can work in national government. So I thought it's important to come and bring a briefing. Going towards next year, we've agreed that there will be regular interactions between leaders of opposition parties so that we can begin to have more discussions about some of the challenges that we faced, but also to continue to collaborate on other big national matters as we offer that alternative for South Africa come 2019. Thank you very much. I think we can take some questions. Why don't you pour Roman or guy and then Simnigio. Let me take 3 and then you must be specific. We want to answer the question and maybe leaders can give various inputs as they go. Simnigio, who else is there? So, yeah, Mom. Lizega from News 24. And then let me take just for this first round. And the bone Mklegazwa. Uchemva. Reabu on Sprat. Thank you, Bob.
I can only see a cap there. I don't see anybody.
All right, big. Hey, that's big. All right, from Daily Maverick. Let me take that first round and let's proceed. Simnigi.
Yes. Is this coalition still in talks with the EFF to convince them to join this coalition, or are you going to continue with the system you've been working with now, is where they remain in opposition and then agree to vote with you on certain issues in the municipalities where you share power?
Sure. Okay.
Just to add on to my colleague's question, obviously we've seen how the EFF has been crucial in this partnership. We've seen how they helped the DA in Nelson Mandela Bay and in Johannesburg during the motions of new confidence. How crucial is it for them to partner up to get into this coalition? And also, Mr. Ndakota, I just want to ask you, in terms of what's happening in the Nelson Mandela Bay, I mean, the rifts between the DA and the UDM, Mubani and Mr. Trollope, Mayor Trollope, what is your take, your reaction on it? I mean, pity Mr. Olomisa is not here because he's spoken out about the DA strong arming the coalition. Do you feel that, is there any fears that the DA might do the same to you?
Well, let's wait until the go. Peggy?
Yes, my question is directed to besides the DA of the gentleman. My question is, if you knew what you know now, would you still partner with the DA?
Are you asking them to renew their vows?
No,
I'm saying, I don't know. I take what you're saying, Peggy. If you knew what you know now, would you still go into coalition? Okay, let me take just some key questions. In fact, I can speak a little bit about the first. Look, what is important to note is that I think the EFF have their program. Their stated position has been that there are a number of issues that they want to look at, that they want to advance. But where we find points of commonality, I think the relationship works. And the points of commonality are such that we can't allow metros to be used as ATMs. We can't allow a space where corruption thrives in various places, and those discussions are on an ongoing basis. But let alone that, we've also found that we share certain common things. Like, it's unfair that you on one side have got Sandton, on another side you still have communities like Stuetla. So how do we go there and deliver for the people? You can't sit here today and 23 years on, after ANC government, you recognize those shortfalls and you say, oh, well, we must go back and help the ANC continue with the looting, the corruption, and the high levels of unemployment. It's, for us, something that means that South Africans need a change. And I think the discussions with the EFF have been helpful in that regard. That they must join formally into a coalition is not a position that I think they want to take, neither is it something that we're advancing. Because they made it clear up front where they stand, and we are very clear. We've got a program that goes. That's why the EFF does not occupy any executive positions, and that is their stated position up front. And in Kota, I think I spoke about the EFF DA issue. I think maybe you need to respond and then other people can add, because we discussed some of these issues as we go.
But if I may, I do want to take a bite at this issue that is raised about the EFF. It's important for South Africans to understand that coalition governments are voluntary participation by all of the parties. In founding a coalition, you agree a limited number of objectives that you are agreed on, such as respect for the Constitution, resistance or opposition to corruption, non-racialism and things like that. Now, the document we signed when we formed the coalition will tell you what are the things that we agreed are common amongst ourselves. There are other issues that we don't include, but as time goes on, we interact and discuss them. If we find that there's broader, we add those to broaden the foundation of the coalition. Now, the EFF were particularly cautious. They did not want to commit themselves to all these issues in the coalition agreement, and therefore decided that they would come with us on an issue-by-issue basis. That is good, because it has enabled the country, enabled the coalition to take power and to exercise it on those issues that they were comfortable about. We are convinced that as time goes on, they are going to find that they can serve the people even better if they came into the coalition in full force and participated in the implementation of the policies that we are agreed on. So there's no panic about that issue at this time. With regard to the question whether, with regard to Nelson Mandela, whether the Congress of the People is not afraid, or any one of these partners here are not afraid that, I don't know what is it that we are saying the DA has done to the UDM. The issue that has arisen in the UDM has been one of whether we consistently apply the agreement of the coalition partners. Surely, you can't agree to be a part of the coalition, and then you want to go and collaborate with the opposition to the coalition. That cannot be right, because that means you are breaking the agreement you yourself signed and agreed to implement. If there are points of difference, or for instance, you cannot agree to be part of the coalition, which has agreed that we will not allow misuse of public funds. And when the coalition, when the executive takes a position that this use of blue lights and all of that around the city, first of all, it takes away a lot of resources which must be used for housing, for water supply and things like that. Therefore, we don't need it. We don't need blue lights. We need this money to go to the service of the people. Now you decide, no, I am going to have blue lights. Why do you need blue lights? When the people don't have water, when the people need that money for housing and so on. It is in violation of the agreement. I don't know what is it that one can say the DA. It can't be the DA, because there are a number of parties in that Nelson Mandela Metro. So necessarily, if there's a point of difference, it must come before the council. And you can't be a member of that council and then vote against the council that you are a member, a partner in. We have no fear of, in any way, of being, we can't be misused by the DA. We came into the coalition voluntarily. And if there's something we fundamentally do not agree with, we are free to say, no, sorry, but we are not part of this. We are pulling out there and so on. Thank you.
I must also add that because we are also part of that arrangement in Nelson Mandela Bay, we have agreed on values and principles. And as principled people, we honor our word. When there are differences, we are adults and not children. We talk, we discuss, and we debate. But we agree that it is betrayal that you make an agreement with somebody and then behind their back, you turn around. Now that shows that some people are not as principled as they should be. Now because we are principled people, we believe that the DA will continue honoring the agreement, as all of us would honor the agreement. We are adults who differ on issues. We are adults who are able to discuss issues and come to an agreement. So it is unfortunate what has been happening at Nelson Mandela Bay, and we are hoping that it will not happen in other places in future. So before we get into agreements in future, we'll have to make sure that there is a total commitment to the spirit of the letter. Once we sign and say we agree, we have to live by that. And the DA has been holding on to the agreement, and we have been respecting the agreement, and for as long as it happens, there is no fear that one day the DA can say, Freedom Front, we don't want to cope, or ACDB don't want. It's because there are also people who honor agreements. So it is about being principled and agreeing to the spirit of the agreement at all times, that if we don't agree, then we talk, but we don't go behind each other's back. Thank you.
What I want to say on the matter of the EFF, we must understand that a coalition is only one form ensuring a joint government. So I want to use the term joint government. You must remember that after 1994 we had a government of national unity. So it was a joint government, but it was not a formal coalition. So as already been said, there are some principles that we differ on. Specifically when it comes to the EFF, it's the land question and the land issue. So we couldn't find each other on that matter. So the moment you go into a formal coalition, of course, then you must have some basic principles whereupon you agree. So yes, we have a joint government, and I do believe you can have different forms to ensure a joint government, whereas a coalition is one. But in this case, it is also proof that you don't have to be formally part of a coalition to ensure a joint government. As far as Nelson Mandela Bay is concerned, I do believe that the leader of the UDM is a responsible leader, and we as leaders of opposition parties understand that the responsibility that we have is to ensure that what is in the best interest of the electorate. And I do believe that that problem will be solved, and at this moment it's still part of the coalition. And that is part of the challenges of a coalition. It's not something new. It doesn't matter where, or you can go all over the world. In any coalition, you will have challenges. I see Merkel is still trying to get the coalition, sir.
I think it'd be worth equally so. You know, often people, when you look at, I'll speak on behalf of the DA, is that we must never find ourselves in a situation where we say we are disinterested in a multi-party democracy. I am animated by the fact that I want each of these respective parties to do well. I want these because it's in the interest of our people. I want a South Africa where ultimately we can set up that alternative for the people of our country. So when you then play South Africa in 2019, you must acknowledge that there are various respective histories that bring us to this point. And if we believe, as I do, that the major obstacle to the development of our people is the mismanagement of resources by the African National Congress, then we can't sit here and say we must be comfortable with status quo. We must work collectively to ensure that we bring a government that will deliver for the people. And that's why we continuously, we learn lessons, but we come together to say, here's the South Africa we want to bring, here's the diversity of the South Africa that we are working towards. And if we were to appoint a government in 2019, it must be an expression of that, but born on principle that says you'll always respect the Constitution, always respect the rule of law, be ruthless against corruption, ensure we can work hard to create work conditions for our people, and ultimately ensure that the state is not captured. So we are agreed on these issues, and that's why it's in our interest and the interest of South Africa that the project succeeds.
Okay, can I add to this? And we must also remember that exactly what Mr. Maimane has said now, that the electoral system of South Africa makes it possible that you can vote for any political party. Doesn't matter which one. Your vote counts. And that's the most important thing, that we must say to the people of South Africa, if you want the ANC out of government, you must go and vote. You can vote for any party or the party you feel share your values. And you will know that it will contribute to ensure that we get the ANC out of government.
Let me just take one last round, and then if there are any other questions. Tula Sizwe, from your recent trip in Zambia. And I want to say we acknowledge your work and the work of the media. I thought you did a great job, so I want to acknowledge that. Ubaba over there, yes, and then you've had a round. All right.
Tula Sizwe from ENCA. Just two questions from me. One is, obviously, I was a bit getting here. What's the explanation for the absence of Mr. Olomisa and the representation of the UDM, given what we know about what's happening?
Sure, we covered that.
Then the second question has to do with when you do a SWOT analysis to this, what you called the 2019 project, how much of a threat does the upcoming ANC conference pose? In a sense of the possibility of a resurgence of the ANC, depending on how the conference goes and perhaps how those people who are elected there perhaps deliver in a particular way. And then lastly, if I can sneak in, what is your approach to 2019? Is it about resting power in certain provinces, or is it an all-out strategy that says nationally, let's just go for Pretoria as opposed to going for the capital, that is Johannesburg?
Right. Honorable Sir.
I'm adding on from President's question. On the issue of the UDM, I just want to be more specific. UDM has been one political party that we have disagreed, especially as far as the issue of investment is concerned. Is it a function of you disagreeing with the political party in terms of, because for example, what the DA has been saying is the issue of we are decisive in terms of corruption and. Is it a function of you disagreeing with the person of Ubani, or is it a fundamental disagreement with the DA as a political party? And as a coalition now, as a collective, going into 2019, if you have those problems, what are your plans in terms of ensuring that you minimize the disagreement that we have to an extent that they do not necessarily hammer on the coherence of the coalition?
Hi, I'm Claudia Melovich from the Business Day. I want to say very local though. You were now discussing all of your coalition plans for 2019, but there's coalition negotiations going on currently. Can you take us into your confidence with regards to the negotiations so far with Metro Normal?
Lisa. Oh, have you asked it? All right. I mean, seeing as the question is, Tulas, earlier on I'd covered the point that there was I said the leader of the UDM had communicated to us that there was a private matter that he needed to attend to that pertains to the funeral, the passing away of, and I'm not exact of one of the facts, so it's a private matter between him. But I think it speaks to the broad question. See, when you go into a coalition, I think you must agree on very specific principles that you go with. And I think that's the point that Ndatel Kota made. In this instance, as I've always maintained consistently so, we've not fought the UDM. There's a problem here with Councillor Bobane, who's voting against the party, is voting against the coalition, is sponsoring motions of no confidence. And that's been consistent from day one. Arrived and organizes marches against the municipality. Now, clearly you can't then say you are in a coalition with someone who votes against the coalition. It doesn't quite work like that. What was important is that it's important that each party takes its own decisions, and that's where I would believe that going forward we need to say, how does, in essence, because I can't go into how we deal with Bobani from a party point of view, that's up to General Holomisa to be able to attend to that matter. But from where we sit, and we had a good discussion about it this morning, is to say we must be resolute about the principles that we stand for, that you can't violate the coalition agreements, and that ultimately, that where we stand in Nelson Mandela Bay, we believe the situation as it stands now, there's been an elimination of the deputy executive mayor position. We think the government is remaining strong, the coalition parties have been working together there, and ultimately we'll get an engagement with the UDM going into the next year so we can say, where do we go from henceforth? Because it's important for the project of South Africa for us to get clarity on that issue. So I think that's where the matter is at now.
Mr. Memon, if I may add something here. My dear friends, the beginnings of the problem of Nelson Mandela was that having set up a municipality out of the coalition, and I take this because I think this is the simplest way to explain this. There has not been any problem between the coalition and the UDM in all other municipalities where we are working with the UDM. What happened in Nelson Mandela? A decision is taken by the executive that all the members, the MMCs, should not use blue lights because they are consuming a lot of money which should be used for development purposes. That's a very straightforward, simple matter. Mr. Bobani decided that no, he will use the blue lights. He was in the meeting in which the decision was taken. He will use the blue lights. Whether the mayor doesn't use the blue lights, none of the others are using blue lights. But he decided he must use blue lights. Frankly, what should the other partners now say? Yeah, boss. When we say this is wrong, when the others say this is wrong because it gives an impression of a coalition leadership that is extravagant with the resources of the people, he refuses. What should we do? And then, of course, after that, when there are issues to vote about in that municipality, he goes and votes against the rest of the other coalition partners. This individual. Why should we be blamed? Because the party that has deployed him there is the one that carries the responsibility to say to him, like all other partners, we must respect the collective decision of the coalition partners. But in all other municipalities, we don't have this problem. This problem is very peculiar to Nelson Mandela. We can't explain beyond that point. And we leave it to the citizens of Nelson Mandela and the citizens of South Africa and various municipalities to judge for themselves. If somebody can say we are wrong on one or other things, please tell us. Thank you.
Last point, Claudia, which is, I mean, as you know, there's a dispute in Metsimaholo about the seat allocation. So we've written to the MEC to seek relief on that basis, because it's going to be important going towards 2021 elections as more of this issue is going to take place. We think that we've got a solid case, and we got correspondence back from the MEC to say the matter is receiving attention, and so they'll give us guidance. Once you've adjudicated on the seat numbers, I think the discussions will then unfold from there. But at this point in time, let's get the electoral results consistently first, and then we can decide what we do from there. So those discussions will carry on.
Has the MEC given you a timeline?
Not at this point. Not at this point. Not at this point. So we'll await the absolute outcome of that. But there are some challenges in that municipality. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming through. Siyabulela enkosi. Siyaphambili. Oh, Tula Sizi, you asked me the question about.
I was prepared to respond.
All right, coalition party leaders of the DA, the UDM, the ACDP, COPE and the Freedom Front Plus briefing the media, reviewing the past year of coalition-led governance in the cities of Johannesburg, Tshwane and the Nelson Mandela Bay. Let's just take you through some of those points. COPE leader Musiela Kota, he said that they're thrilled with the progress that has been made in the cities where they govern. He said that South Africa is a very complex country, but they're confident about the way forward. Then from Freedom Front Plus leader Peter Groenewald, he said that South Africa is a young democracy and it's a good step forward that a coalition government has been made possible. He said that they believe that in 2019 no single party will have a majority. And then mainly from Musi Maimane, he said that South Africa is facing many challenges, poverty, unemployment, etc. But he said that they are striving to make changes. It hasn't been easy for them, but it's given South Africans an alternative. He said that in Tshwane they've been uncovering corruption and they've sold the mayor's house, and that money will go towards housing initiatives. He also said that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in Tshwane, but they've made progress in the areas of safety, transport and jobs. And then he spoke about Johannesburg. He says that they've had a massive cleanup against corruption, and that they've also been working to address infrastructure challenges and the issue of fighting drugs. And then he said that in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro, he says that confidence in the government there has risen in the past year. He said that corruption is a major challenge in this metro, but that they are making inroads. He said that the coalition governments are the future of South Africa, and that as they go on, they're learning lessons and they're working towards a better South Africa while respecting the Constitution. So that, in a nutshell, what came out of that briefing. There is a lot on the go today. There are the Esidimeni hearings as well as the Eskom inquiries, which are continuing. We're monitoring all that for you. We'll take a short break. You're with the Midday Report. Stay with us. We'll be back just after this.